Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jaliyah Davis. The police officers who arrived at the scene were horrified by what they discovered. Body parts were scattered on the road, and the girl was found decapitated and missing a leg. Blood was splattered everywhere, creating a gruesome sight. But what had actually occurred? Jaliyah Davis was born in Colorado Springs in 1991. She has an older sister named Toby Davis. They had a close relationship, like best friends. Eventually, the family moved to Marietta, a small town of 13,000 people near the West Virginia border. After finishing school, Jaliyah took a job at a local store, aspiring to become an esthetician as her dream for the future. On Friday, November 18, 2011, 20-year-old Jaliyah left home around 6 p.m. to meet her friend Kristen. They planned to get ready for a party together at Brian's house, where Jaliyah would spend the night afterward. The girls dressed up, applied makeup, and styled their hair beautifully. Friends picked them up, and they all went to the party and then to the pool room in the park. Although Jaliyah didn't know the other friends very well, she enjoyed her time with Kristen. She texted her mom Kim updating her on their plans and saying they were having a great evening. Her last text was sent at 9:30 p.m. The party with Jaliyah's friends was still going strong. At 3:28 a.m., Toby received a call from Jaliyah, who was at the gas station. Toby was with a guy at the time and told Jaliyah that they were coming to pick her up. During the call, Toby heard Jaliyah ask Kristen to give her her keys, while Kristen mumbled something in the background. Then Toby and her lover went to the gas station. 5 minutes later, Jaliyah called Toby again, her tone angry and annoyed. She asked Toby to meet her somewhere else. While stopped on the highway, Toby asked Jaliyah what was going on. Jaliyah replied that it was not something to discuss over the phone and insisted on explaining in person. Toby could hear Jaliyah arguing with Kristen, accusing her of being a bad friend. Toby realized that the two friends had argued. Since they were in a hurry, Jaliyah decided to change direction and go to a location about 20 minutes away. Jaliyah urged older sister to hurry and yelled at Kristen, calling her terrible. Toby tried to calm her down, assuring her that they would be there soon as she and her lover ran towards them. 20 minutes later, Toby decided to call Kristen and ask what had happened to them. Before Kristen could reply, the connection was lost. Toby and her lover arrived at the designated location but could not believe their eyes. Several police cars had blocked the road. They stopped and asked the police what was going on. The police replied that there was a dead body of a girl on the road. It was an African-American woman wearing a white coat. Toby looked at her boyfriend in horror. According to the description, it was Jaliyah. The police did not tell Toby anything else. In a panic, she called Kim, her mother, and the rest of the family, who quickly arrived at the scene. While waiting for her family, Toby called Kristen back. She said she saw something, then hung up. Toby tried to call Kristen back, but she didn't answer. Jaliyah's family, who had just arrived, began to press the police for information. Police confirmed that a body found on the highway was Jaliyah's, and that her identification was found with her. Her car was 300 meters away from where her body was found. Jaliyah had been decapitated, and some of her body parts were scattered on the road. Her family could see a white sheet covering some of her remains. They were in shock and trying to understand what had happened to Jaliyah. They had only spoken to her on the phone 20 minutes earlier, so they were confused by how quickly this tragedy had unfolded. A truck driver was driving down the road when he noticed a gruesome scene. Body parts were strewn across the highway. He immediately called 911 at 3:48 a.m. and remained at the scene waiting for police. To prevent other vehicles from driving over the remains, he began blocking oncoming vehicles. The condition of the remains made it impossible to determine the gender of the victim. When police arrived, they secured the area and began questioning the truck driver and other passing motorists, but no one was able to provide information. The drivers said they did not see anything suspicious, nor did they touch the remains for the victim's belongings. There were no cars parked nearby, and the reason the victim abandoned the vehicle remains unclear. Jaliyah was brutally killed. Her head was discovered in the bushes alongside the road. One of her legs was severed below the knee, and her right breast was missing. Fragments of brain were found on the nearby fence posts. The scene was horrifying. Jaliyah was barefoot and completely topless, wearing only torn jeans. Her clothing was neatly arranged on the fence. First her bra, then her shirt, and lastly her jacket. All the items were tattered and stained with blood. It remains a mystery who placed her belongings there. A car was discovered 300 meters from her body, crashed into a fence. Unlike the horrific condition of her body, the car appeared to be relatively intact. It was empty and running, with the doors locked and the headlights on, suggesting the driver had left in a hurry. The front passenger window was open and there were noticeable dents in the car. Blood was found on the license plate, in the trunk on the passenger side, and on the taillights. The police deemed her death suspicious and launched an investigation. Toby kept calling Kristen, who was the last person to see Jaliyah and had been with her before the incident, in hopes of getting an explanation. Kristen mentioned she had witnessed something, but the calls kept getting disconnected. After the police conducted their investigation, the family members visited the scene and took photographs. They found a boot print in the gravel. The following day, the police aimed to interview everyone who had been with Jaliyah that night, including Kristen and her friends, but could not locate Kristen. She also did not answer her phone. When police went to Kristen's house, her father responded, stating that she did not wish to speak to anyone and that they would be hiring a lawyer. 12 hours after Jaliyah's death, Kristen indeed hired a lawyer. She became the primary focus of the investigation, and her refusal to cooperate shocked Jaliyah's family. They suspected she was hiding something. Otherwise, she wouldn't be avoiding everyone, ignoring the police and her family, or hiring a lawyer so quickly. They also knew that Kristen was the granddaughter of the sheriff and had a history of altercations at a bar, where she was known for her temper, but her grandfather always covered for her. 3 days later, Kristen met with the police alongside her lawyer. She explained that she arrived home at 7 p.m. to prepare for the party. Afterward, she and her friends drove to Brian's house in Jaliyah's car, arriving around 10 p.m. The party had several unfamiliar faces, and people were drinking and socializing. Feeling bored, Kristen, Jaliyah, and 2 male friends went to pick up another friend, Katie, and get some more drinks. The 5 of them then returned to the party and continued drinking. Kristen and Katie's friends tried to stop Jaliyah from drinking more, but they were unsuccessful. Jaliyah ended up consuming about 15 shots. Initially, her friends didn't notice how drunk she was, she didn't fall and seemed to walk fine. They went to play pool, leaving Jaliyah at Brian's house. During the game, they noticed that Jaliyah was very drunk. The alcohol had taken a toll on her, causing her to act inappropriately. She flirted and danced with Katie's ex-boyfriend, making everyone uncomfortable. As the situation became more tense, Kristen decided it was time to leave. They left the pool hall around 3 a.m. Freddie was driving. Kristen was in the front passenger seat, and Jaliyah and Katie were in the back. They headed home but did not go inside. While the friends discussed their plans, Jaliyah was on the phone. After the call, she realized she could not find her bracelet and became upset, blaming Kristen for losing it. Kristen had actually carefully removed the bracelet in the pool hall and put it in her bag, but this only made Jaliyah angrier. Jalea got out of the car and called her sister to pick her up. Kristen then overheard Jalea calling her sister to change the meeting location. Jalea then moved her car and said she would wait for her sister, assuring everyone that she would stay in the car and not go anywhere. The friends then went to McDonald's. This was the last time they saw Jalea, and what happened to her after that is unknown. The police questioned several friends, including Kristen, who agreed to testify about the night of the incident. However, the police found many inconsistencies in their statements. Katie shared a similar story but added more details. After Jalea was dropped off, she went to Kristen's house. Katie heard Kristen talking on the phone with Toby. After that, they all went home. Katie met her ex-boyfriend Chris, and they spent the night together. The next morning, Katie learned that Jalea had died. She stated that she didn't blame Jalea for flirting with her boyfriend because she was drunk. Chris supported her claim, saying they were together that night, and he mentioned that he foolishly flirted with Jalea, who was bothering him. He noted that she was very drunk and struggling to stand, but he didn't witness any arguments between the girls that night. However, he also mentioned that Katie told him about a fight between Kristen and Jalea after they left the billiard room. Freddie, who drove the girls to the party, is the son of a police officer. He said he arrived at the party before the girls at 11 p.m., but Kristen claimed they were already there at 10 p.m. It's unclear who is telling the truth. They might have just misremembered the time. Freddie mentioned seeing a woman arguing with a white man in the billiard room, but he didn't know him. After the party, Freddie admitted he had been drinking a lot and drove them home. On the way, there was a disagreement about a bracelet. He stated they left Jalea in the car while they went to McDonald's. After that, he took Kristen home and then went to his own place. He was unsure how Jalea ended up on the highway. The police found the friends' testimonies confusing, particularly Freddie's, who insisted they had not given Jalea a ride. However, in the last call made when Jalea was on the highway, Kristen's voice was heard, suggesting they were together, possibly without Freddie, or that he was too drunk to recall what happened. As time went on without any arrests, many people started to think the police were not conducting an investigation. They dismissed the incident as an accident. Rumors spread throughout the city suggesting that Kristen and Freddie played a role in Jalea's death. Many people believed that her death did not appear to be a simple car accident. Her car showed only minor damage. A few dents, a slightly broken windshield, and a shattered front passenger window. However, there was no significant damage to explain how her body ended up 300 meters away from the vehicle. It seemed more plausible that she had exited the car and had been struck by someone. Additionally, it was puzzling why all of her clothes above the waist were removed and neatly hung on a nearby fence. To make matters more confusing, police later discovered a removable hood from Jalea's jacket in the bushes behind the fence. How did it get there, and why didn't the police catch it earlier? It was also odd that her body parts were found scattered across 2 lanes of traffic. Due to the extent of her injuries, her body had to be cremated. In 2012, Amber Stafford approached the police to report what she claimed to have seen on the night Jalea died. She said she met Jalea at a pool hall and observed a fight in the parking lot involving Jalea. 2 black men and a white woman. According to Amber, after the confrontation, Jalea drove away while the men followed her in another car. Jalea attempted to escape from them, leading to a chase. Ultimately, the other car collided with Jalea's vehicle, and Amber witnessed her getting out before the attack occurred. Amber's account appears to contradict that of Jalea's friends and sister. Amber was offered a polygraph test but did not pass. During questioning, Amber confessed that she fabricated her story but did not provide a reason for it. As a result, she received a 6-month prison sentence and a $500 fine. In March 2013, the results of Jalia's autopsy were finally made public. Toxicology tests revealed no illegal substances, but the alcohol level in her blood was twice the legal limit. The Wood County Sheriff's Department concluded that Jalia's death was accidental. After her friends left, the Jalia did not wait for her sister, who was about to arrive. Instead, she started the car and drove away. Since she was drunk, she lost control of the vehicle. Traveling at a high speed of about 110 kilometers per hour, her car skidded to the right and crashed into the guardrail. Because she was not wearing a seatbelt, her body was thrown to the right and hit the windshield when the airbag deployed. She was ejected through the right front door window while the car continued to move. As she struck the guardrail pillars, she bounced back towards the car, causing her clothes to fly off. She flipped over the car, hitting the roof and trunk, which had blood on it, before being thrown away from the vehicle. A car may have been driving down the road at night and, in the darkness, failed to notice a body, running over it and dragging the remains across the road, leaving behind many fragments. This scenario seems implausible. Jalia's family did not accept it. They believed their daughter's body couldn't have traveled such a distance. Even if she had been struck by the car, she wouldn't have landed on the hood or trunk. The roof showed no dents that would have resulted from a body hitting it at impact. The police also confirmed that there were no blood, hair, or fibers from her clothing on the pieces of the broken passenger door. No glass was found in Jalia's hair or head, so her family does not think she collided with broken glass on the door before being thrown out the window. There was no significant damage to the fence that the police reported the car had crashed into. However, this detail doesn't explain how the victim's clothes were neatly hung on the fence. If she had accidentally ended up there, her belongings would have been out of order, with her underwear on top. Instead, the shirt and underwear appeared to be intentionally torn. It's also puzzling why the car doors were locked. Typically, when the airbag deploys in this model, the doors unlock automatically, so someone must have closed them. A member of Jalia's family expressed surprise that physical evidence was left at the scene after the police investigation. Clothing, including underwear, a t-shirt, and a jacket, were still hanging on the fence, and no one had collected them for evidence or conducted DNA testing. In addition, the hood of Jalia's jacket, which had blood on it, was left in the bushes. An earring belonging to Jalia was found 5 meters from her body, also left on the road. Police did not search for fingerprints or DNA on any of this evidence. Jalia's car was towed away by police and parked outside without being properly inspected. Another strange detail was that Jalia's favorite keychain, decorated with J-shaped gemstones, a gift from her sister Toby, was missing. Jalia always wore it on her keychain. It was not found at the scene, and it was later discovered that Kristen had it. Kristen claimed that Jalia had given it to her, but no one believed Kristen. Jalia was very careful with her belongings, especially her jewelry, and even argued with Kristen over a bracelet. It would have been absurd for her to give such an expensive keychain. Taubie also recalled that Jalia had asked for her keys in a phone call. Kristen had the keychain attached to the same set of keys. Kristen's attorney eventually returned the keychain to Jalia's family. The individuals in the car that night were never considered suspicious or questioned. Their phones were not collected for testing because Kristen, Katie, and Freddie provided alibis, stating that they were at McDonald's when Jalia died. Surveillance camera footage from McDonald's shows a car similar to Freddie's arriving at 3:32 a.m. Freddie picked up his order at the drive-thru, but it is unclear who else was in the car. McDonald's employees have mentioned that the timestamp on the records does not accurately reflect reality, although it is unclear exactly how much of a discrepancy there is. Since Jalia called Taubie while they were on the freeway at 3:33 a.m., and Kristen argued, it is possible that they were still on the freeway at that time. It is also possible that the time Freddie's car was at McDonald's was accurate, and Kristen was not in Freddie's car. Despite this apparent inconsistency, the police did not verify the exact time they arrived at McDonald's and accepted this testimony, removing all suspicion from all three. The family of the Jaliaya received Shikar and carried out their own inspection. They found a significant amount of blood underneath the car. A car hit her and dragged her along the road, which is why there was blood left under the vehicle. The blood found on the road supports this account. The airbag designed to protect the driver deployed, but the one for her did not activate. There was no DNA from Jaliaya found, suggesting she did not come into contact with her airbag. It was discovered that the passenger airbag was faulty and did not function in the car. Additionally, a drop of blood belonging to someone else was found, but its source is currently unknown. The family of the Jaliaya believes she was the victim of a crime that night. They suspect she was struck by the same car, and after the impact, her head hit a fence post, leading to her death. The car injured her severely, resulting in her head and leg being torn apart. Jaliaya's family is working hard to seek justice for her, but so far, the case is still closed. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarah Foxwell. Sarah Foxwell was born on May 18, 1998 in Salisbury, Maryland. Mary, Sarah's mother, had 3 children from a previous marriage. When Sarah's parents divorced, her mother had to take care of all the children by herself. Sarah always tried to keep the peace between her sisters when they argued and fought. Sarah always radiated positivity. Sarah's family decided to move in with her aunt and grandparents. As Christmas approached, Mary had to work extra shifts to buy presents for the children. Mary lived in a large farmhouse outside Salisbury. The children loved it because there was no space to play. On December 22nd, with only 3 days left until Christmas, the children were excited and playing all over the house. They ordered pizza for dinner, and around 9 p.m., everyone started getting ready for bed. Sarah shared a room with her 6-year-old sister Emma at the end of the hall near the back door. After a while of talking, they both fell asleep. The next morning, Robert Foxwell, Sarah's grandfather, woke up and went to wake the children. When he entered Sarah's room, he found only Emma sleeping. Robert thought that Sarah might have gotten up early, so he began searching the house. However, Robert could not find Sarah anywhere. Robert told Sarah's aunt, Elizabeth Foxwell, about this, and they decided to search together. After a while of searching, they realized that Sarah was no longer at home. Elizabeth thought that Sarah might have gone out to play in the snowy night, but she soon noticed that Sarah's shoes and coat were still at home. This made Elizabeth feel worried. Sarah's toothbrush was missing from its usual place in the bathroom. Elizabeth searched the area around the house with Robert, but they found no sign of Sarah. Finally, Elizabeth decided to call Sarah's mother, Mary. Mary immediately returned home, and they contacted the police to report Sarah missing. The police arrived quickly and began searching the house. Elizabeth told the police that Elizabeth always checked and locked all the doors and windows before going to bed the night before. The police began to suspect a kidnapping. They thought the kidnapper might have taken Sarah's toothbrush before leaving the house. The police went to all the windows to check. When they approached the back door near Sarah's room and tried the handle, the door opened immediately. Elizabeth confirmed that the door had been locked the night before. Elizabeth remembered that they had left a spare key near the front door, but when she went there to check, the key was gone. This further reinforced the suspicion of a kidnapping. The kidnapper had learned about their family's life. Only then did he learn about the family's spare key. and the dog in the house did not bark or make any noise on the night of the incident, although the dog would normally be very wary of strangers. Fearing that Sarah had been kidnapped, the police immediately launched a large-scale search operation. News of Sarah's disappearance quickly spread throughout the community, and many local residents contacted the police to offer help. The police chief appealed to the community through the media, asking people to check their properties for any suspicious signs. To search for Sarah, the police mobilized dozens of officers from the local police department and received support from police from neighboring towns and other states. The common goal of everyone was to find Sarah alive. Since the criminal had taken her toothbrush, this could be considered keeping her alive, so the police mobilized all resources to participate in this search. Outside the house, the police found the first traces of the kidnapper. There were fresh tire tracks in the snow, indicating that the kidnapper had used a car. Since all of Sarah's warm clothes were left at the scene, it was clear that the kidnapper could not have taken her on foot. Sarah's relatives were taken to the police station to give statements. While at the police station, Sarah's sister, Emma, revealed an important piece of information. She recalled that she had woken up on the night of the incident because she heard a man talking to Sarah. Not understanding what was going on, Emma pretended to be asleep, but she watched the man leave the room with Sarah. Emma's account also revealed that Emma recognized the man. This man was Mr. Thomas, a familiar face known to family members. Thomas Leggs, 30, was the ex-boyfriend Elizabeth. Although the couple had separated several months earlier, Thomas was also well known to the police due to his extensive criminal record. Thomas was first sentenced to prison at the age of 18 for assaulting a 12-year-old girl, serving a 4-year sentence but released early after a few months. He was then sentenced to 7 years for assaulting another girl but was released early after only 6 months. Thomas was then sentenced to 6 months for another assault. In short, Thomas had a history of abusing girls and women. After Thomas's wife returned home from the hospital with their newborn daughter, he attempted to assault another girl on the same day. His wife later divorced him and obtained a restraining order against Thomas because he had threatened to kill both her and their daughter. Another incident occurred when a woman and her young daughter moved into the street where Thomas lived. One day, the young daughter and her friends were playing in the yard. Thomas approached the two children. He said that he had been watching the two girls playing in the yard and called them wild girls. Thomas then picked up a stick and began to hit the two children on the buttocks. The girl ran inside and told her mother what had happened. The mother saw Thomas through the window and realized that she had seen his face before moving into the house. She checked the sex offender registry in the area and had a photo of Thomas. The mother identified Thomas as the attacker. She reported Thomas to the police, but although the case went to court, he avoided any punishment for his actions. Before the trial began, the woman was asked not to mention that Thomas had been convicted of sexual assault and was on the sex offenders register, as it could lead to an unfair verdict for Thomas. In another incident, just months before Sarah's disappearance, Thomas was arrested for suspicious behavior. He had sneaked into a 24-year-old woman's bedroom in the middle of the night, undressed, and masturbated next to her bed. After his arrest, Thomas was released on bail. Initially, he successfully kept his criminal record from Sarah's aunt, Elizabeth, but she eventually found out. However, Thomas was able to convince Elizabeth that all the accusations were false. The police suspected that Thomas was behind Sarah's abduction for the following reasons. Sarah's relatives also said that while Thomas was dating Elizabeth, he spent significantly more time with Sarah than with the other children in the family. This was not considered suspicious at the time, but after Sarah went missing, it became concerning. The police wanted to question Thomas. So they went to his house, where they took him in for questioning and also obtained a search warrant for the shed. Inside the shed, the police found messy and appalling living conditions, but did not find any evidence linking them to Sarah's disappearance. Police discovered a large collection of adult magazines and DVDs in Thomas's storage room. During questioning, Thomas repeatedly denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. Thomas said he tried to avoid being alone with children while dating Elizabeth. When asked about Emma seeing him on the night of the abduction, Thomas claimed that Emma often made up stories and that he was not there. Thomas showed a lack of seriousness when it came to Sarah's disappearance, constantly smiling, mocking the sheriff during questioning. Thomas also claimed that he had an alibi, saying that he had been at the bar with his friends until late at night. Police quickly investigated Thomas's alibi. Had someone who had seen him at the bar. However, he left the bar around 1 a.m. and did not reappear until around 7 a.m. When police checked Thomas's phone, they discovered that he had texted several women that night asking them out on dates, all of whom he rejected. Although the search for Sarah was difficult, one reason the police continued to search was the hope that Sarah was still alive. So when the police searched Thomas's pickup truck, they found Sarah's green toothbrush and a large stick of gum. The police believe that Thomas may have used the stick of gum to get Sarah into his car. The tire tracks on Thomas's car matched the tire tracks left in the snow in front of Sarah's house the night she went missing. When police questioned Thomas about this, he claimed that he had not been to the house in over a month. In order to search for Sarah, hundreds of police officers and volunteers worked together to search a large area around Sarah's house. They searched through abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. A canine unit with search dogs was also mobilized to help track Sarah's scent. In response to that information, helicopters provided aerial observation so as not to miss any areas. Many people came to the police station and volunteered to join the search. Because of bad weather and the approaching holiday, the search that day did not bring the desired results. However, no one was discouraged, and the search continued early the next morning. During the search, the number of volunteers did not decrease but increased significantly. In total, 3,000 people participated in the search. Meanwhile, the police collected more evidence implicating Thomas in the kidnapping. Immediately after bringing Thomas to the police station, he was given a new set of clothes and his clothes were sent to the laboratory. Experts discovered strange DNA on Thomas's underwear and compared it with Sarah's DNA sample taken from her belongings. The results showed that the two DNA samples were a perfect match. Based on the discovery of DNA on Thomas's clothes, the police came to a conclusion. Thomas likely sexually assaulted Sarah after kidnapping her. On the second day of the search, there were still no results, and on Christmas morning, thousands of people continued to search for Sarah. Even though it was a holiday, no one gave up. Police focused their search on an area near the state line, about 8 miles from Sarah Elizabeth's aunt's house. The area was heavily wooded, prompting hundreds of people to search thoroughly in hopes of finding Sarah alive. However, the actual results were tragic. At around 4 p.m., police discovered Sarah's body lying on the ground near the state line. When medical experts began an autopsy, they determined that Sarah had been sexually assaulted and had signs of strangulation. Notably, experts found soil in Sarah's lungs, suggesting that her killer had attempted to drown her during the torture. After the attack, Sarah suffered severe burns. Police believe her attacker left her in the woods for some time, went to get gasoline, and returned to light her on fire. Finding smoke in Sarah's lungs suggested that Sarah was still alive at the time. The brutality of the case shocked the police, Sarah's family, and those involved in the search for her. After Sarah's body was discovered, forensic experts found some of the girl's hair and pieces of fabric from her pajamas in Thomas's pickup truck. New evidence of Thomas's involvement in the kidnapping was introduced, along with other evidence, but the trial was delayed for more than a year. In early 2011, the prosecution decided to offer Thomas a plea deal. Under the deal, Thomas would admit his guilt and receive a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Thomas eventually agreed to cooperate and tell the police everything. Thomas admitted to luring Sarah away from her home, then taking her away, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. Thomas was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum security prison. During his first days there, another inmate attacked Thomas with a homemade weapon during lunchtime, causing several serious cuts. Thomas survived, and prison staff took extra protective measures to prevent other inmates from harming Thomas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Doreen Erbert. Doreen Erbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California, into a family of 5 children. From a young age, she was a kind and positive person, always looking for ways to help others. After graduating from college, Doreen moved to San Francisco and began working as a physical therapist. At the age of 24, she met Michael Venice, a man who worked in a factory near Doreen's clinic. After getting to know each other for a while, Doreen and Michael started dating, and a few months later, they decided to get married. In 1976, they had a son named Paul. Initially, Michael and Doreen's life was very happy, but after having a child, their relationship began to have problems. After about a year, Doreen and Michael decided to divorce. Their son was raised by Doreen, while Michael was still allowed to visit him regularly. Despite the divorce, Michael and Doreen maintained a cordial relationship. A year later, Doreen met a man named Charles. They began dating, got married, and decided to move to San Jose, settling in a quiet residential area. In 1979, their daughter Deanna was born. Charles, like his wife, dreamed of having a large family. He was overjoyed when their daughter was born. However, tragedy struck the family in February 1980. 4-year-old Paul climbed over the fence around the pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was home at the time, realized what had happened too late. She pulled her son out of the water and called an ambulance. Paul was taken to the hospital and put on life support. However, after 10 days, doctors concluded that there was no chance of survival. The decision was made to disconnect the boy from the machines. Doreen became depressed and devastated, blaming herself constantly, even though the police concluded that it was not her fault. However, Doreen's young daughter Deanna helped her through this pain. For years after the tragic event, Doreen's family finally had some good news. Doreen and Charles had been trying for another child, although they had failed twice due to interrupted pregnancies. But Doreen finally became pregnant again, and this time, everything went well. They were expecting a new baby boy, due in early November. A few days before Doreen was to be admitted to the hospital, her family decided to join in the Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, all the neighbors decorated their houses and handed out candy to the children. Deanna, who was 4 years old at the time, was very keen to join in, and her parents couldn't say no. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she went trick-or-treating with her daughter while Charles stayed home, handing out candy to other children. The mother and daughter returned home just before 9 p.m. Charles informed his wife that they were running out of candy and that he planned to drive to the nearest store to buy more. He left the house around 8:50 p.m. and returned about 15 minutes later. As he approached the house, Charles noticed that the front door was slightly ajar, which he found strange. When he entered, he found his wife lying on the hallway floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood. Doreen showed no signs of life, and Charles immediately called 911. Shortly thereafter, he noticed the body of their unborn child in the living room. Charles was in a state of shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Initially, he thought that Doreen might have had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that the situation was much worse. Beside the child was a human hand, and Charles immediately understood that it was Doreen's hand. When Charles realized that his family was being attacked, he began searching for Deanna, fearing she might be in danger. He saw so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Luckily, Deanna was still alive, but she was hiding behind the sofa in the living room out of fear. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics found Doreen and discovered that she had a weak pulse. They rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, doctors were unable to save her, and she died in the ambulance. Tragically, Doreen's unborn child also died from the brutal attack. Medical experts examined Doreen's body and concluded that she had been repeatedly hit with a long, sharp object like a sword or machete. The police investigated the house and found a horrifying scene that looked like something out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, and even on the ceiling. Several police officers sought psychological help after witnessing the horrific scene. Investigators searched the entire house but found no perpetrator or any clues about the attacker. While investigating the murder, police found significant evidence outside the house. They saw bloody footprints on the sidewalk and suspected that the killer had left the scene in a vehicle. While searching for more clues, police found a blood-stained wolf mask on the front lawn. They believed the mask might have belonged to the killer, as family members said they had never owned it. The mask was sent to a lab for analysis. Police then spoke to Deanna, the only surviving child from the murder. She was in shock but still able to talk. She told police that after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. Her mother, Doreen, opened the door and saw a man wearing a wolf mask holding a knife. The attacker said, "I'm going to kill you now." Doreen screamed, telling her daughter to run away from the house immediately. Deanna hid behind the sofa but could not remember what happened next. It was not until her father found her that Deanna calmed down. Unfortunately, Deanna was unable to provide any further information about the attacker, as he had hidden his identity behind the wolf mask. Investigators initially suspected Doreen's husband, Charles, as the prime suspect. Since he had been out of the house around the time Doreen was attacked, they were suspicious of his trip to the store. When Charles returned, he had stepped in blood several times and even fallen, ending up covered in blood, but the police did not know whether he had done this on purpose to explain the blood stains on his clothes. However, detectives found several problems with this theory. First, Charles's shoes did not match the ones that left bloody footprints on the road. Second, there were no traces of blood found in Charles's car, nor were there any other shoe prints. To clarify the information, the police went to the store that Charles visited and confirmed the time he was there. The employee confirmed that Charles had bought candy at the store that evening. This indicated that he did not have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage also confirmed that Charles was at the store. Therefore, the police no longer considered him the prime suspect. First, they asked Charles if he could think of anyone who might want to harm his family, and Charles immediately mentioned Doreen's ex-husband, Michael. Charles said that initially, Michael maintained a normal relationship with his ex-wife. However, things changed after the death of their son. Michael believed that Doreen had intentionally killed the child to cut off all contact with him. Michael even filed a civil lawsuit against her, but he lost the case. Doreen thought that there was a reason behind the change in Michael's behavior. He had a history of depression after the birth of his son and was distant from both his wife and child. All of this made Michael introverted and caused communication problems. These problems became one of the main reasons why Michael and Doreen decided to divorce. Later, when Doreen married Charles, Michael began to harbor resentment and hostility towards her. This became even more apparent when Michael began to truly hate his ex-wife. Later, Michael lost his job at the place where he had spent most of his life. This created many negative issues in his life. After hearing all this information, the detectives decided to go to Michael's house and talk to him. Although Charles's testimony was not enough to make Michael the prime suspect, since he lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house, they decided to visit him immediately. Around midnight, the police arrived at Michael's house and saw a pickup truck parked near the garage. When they shined a flashlight inside the car, they saw what appeared to be blood on the steering wheel and keys. They then knocked on Michael's door, but no one answered. The lights were on inside the house, and the police could hear water running inside, which made them suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. So they continued knocking. Michael finally opened the door. He remained calm even after being informed of his ex-wife's murder. Michael answered all the police's questions calmly and allowed them into his home without a warrant. According to him, he had gone to the store during the day, returned home, and had not left since. Michael even signed a form giving the police permission to search his home. As he reached for a pen to sign, the investigators noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself earlier while carving pumpkins for Halloween. However, the police were skeptical. The wound was still fresh, and blood was still oozing from it. As several police officers began searching Michael's home, he was asked to go upstairs with an officer to show his identification. However, when he entered the bedroom, Michael's actions aroused suspicion as he appeared to be reaching under the bed. The officer asked him to move away and found a loaded gun holster under the headboard. After discovering the weapon, the police took Michael downstairs to meet with other officers. Their colleagues discovered other suspicious evidence. They found drops of blood on the floor, which led them to the garage, where there was a washing machine and bloody clothing. Based on this evidence, the police had enough to arrest Michael. Detectives and forensic experts investigated Michael's home, looking for more evidence that could connect him to the murder. Police are awaiting the results of blood analysis and have discovered other grisly signs. Initially, the police discovered an empty box containing an 18-inch machete. Medical experts determined that the shape of the knife matched the wound on Doreen's body perfectly. In addition, the police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's home, raising suspicions that they might be for Doreen and Charles. They also found mortuary bags, the type typically used by paramedics, in Michael's home. The presence of these items made the police question Michael's innocence. After compiling all this evidence, the police decided to apply for a warrant for Michael's arrest. Without a warrant, they could only detain him for a limited time. However, the judge said that the evidence they had gathered was not strong enough and that there were many unknowns. As a result, Michael was released and he was freed. 3 days into the investigation, detectives received lab results. The results showed that there were 2 different blood types at the crime scene. The majority of the blood matched Doreen's blood type, while a small amount matched Michael's. This indicated that Michael had injured himself during the attack on his ex-wife. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant, and Michael was charged with the murder of his ex-wife and her unborn child. Detectives continued their investigation and found additional evidence linking Michael to the crime. When they spoke to acquaintances of Michael, they learned that he owned the wolf mask found near Doreen's house. They also found a photo of Michael wearing the mask at a previous Halloween party. To further solidify the case, police found the mask Michael wore in the photo in his home. Michael's trial began in July 1988, 4 years after Doreen's murder. He initially admitted to the crime but later changed his story. He did not deny the murder but claimed he was innocent by reason of mental illness. A psychologist assigned to monitor him concluded that he did have serious mental illness. According to Michael, he became insane on Halloween night when he saw other children trick-or-treating. This reminded him of Paul's death and caused him to collapse. He said that he went to Doreen's house that night with a machete. When she opened the door, he said, "You killed my son," and that he intended to kill her. She immediately recognized the man behind the mask, shouted at her daughter to run, and the next second, Michael attacked her. However, Michael's story had one twist. He said he did not know Doreen was pregnant. This raised suspicions as all her friends claimed that she was clearly pregnant before the tragedy. They even joked that Doreen had become even bigger because of her pregnancy. The murder of Doreen and her unborn child came to light at a trial. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned to kill his ex-wife and her husband. He had told his friends about this desire, and detectives found evidence that he had made elaborate preparations, including 2 coffins and body bags, in his home. However, it appears that he changed his mind and did not carry out his murder plan. This led the prosecution to suspect that he may have feared being caught or discovered. One of the key witnesses in the case was Doreen's daughter, Deanna. She was only 9 years old at the time and still remembers what happened. After a year of investigation and trial, Michael was convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death, but before his execution, the state of California imposed a moratorium on executions. Therefore, Michael remains in custody and his sentence may not be carried out anytime soon. The case left a deep mark on Deanna's life. Years later, she was still haunted by the horrific memories of her mother's death. However, she decided to forgive Michael and try to forget the past. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Andrea Lohagin. Andrea Lohagin was born on January 6, 1977, in Bad Belzig, Germany, to a tight-knit family that consisted of her mother, father, and sister. They lived in a newly built residential complex. As children, Andrea and her sister were known for being obedient and diligent in their studies, which made their parents incredibly proud. By the time Andrea turned 16, she had developed into a stunning young woman and an outstanding student, earning her numerous admirers. Andrea and her sister focused primarily on their studies and socializing with friends at parties, avoiding any unwholesome or troubling pursuits. On October 7, 1993, during the autumn break, 16 years old, Andrea spent the day at a local shopping center with her parents. With only 1 year of high school remaining, Andrea was on the cusp of a significant milestone, looking forward to completing her exams and embarking on her journey into adulthood. Andrea harbored dreams of attending university, building a career, and eventually starting a family of her own. The thought of entering this new phase of her life filled her with immense excitement and anticipation. During their outing to the shopping center, Andrea bought new shoes and jeans. She excited to wear them to a party at the club that was coming up soon. That evening, Andrea, a high school student, planned to attend a gathering at the local youth center, where her friends and acquaintances were waiting for her. The center was only a 15-minute walk from Andrea's home in the small town of Bad Belzig. Since the town was considered very safe, with no prior incidents of attacks or crimes, Andrea's parents felt comfortable allowing her to walk to the party alone. Andrea was expected to return home by 10 p.m. to watch a horror movie with her mother, as was their evening routine. However, when Andrea did not come home on time, her family assumed she would be home in a few hours. Andrea's friends who were at the party said she never showed up, which caused them to become worried. This was unusual behavior for Andrea, who was known for being responsible and punctual. She had never been late before, so her friends were worried. Unfortunately, it was difficult to reach Andrea directly, as mobile phones were not widely used at the time, and the youth center didn't have a landline phone. Her friends would have had to leave the party to call her from another location. Nevertheless, the group chose not to jump to conclusions and stayed at the club. They thought Andrea might be dealing with family issues that prevented her from attending the party. Despite the youth center being close by, none of them tried to check on her. The girls assumed Andrea was either running late or grounded at home, and they continued to enjoy the party. However, when Andrea failed to return home by midnight, her mother grew worried. Normally, Andrea would be home by this time, watching another horror movie. At first, Andrea's mother thought she came home late because she had gone out with friends or visited someone's house. But as the hours passed and Andrea didn't show up, her mother became increasingly alarmed. She tried to contact her daughter's friends, with whom Andrea was supposed to be visiting that evening, but none of them were home. This left her unable to get any information about Andrea's whereabouts. Later, one of the girls finally answered, but she had no information about Andrea. The mother became increasingly worried, realizing that her daughter could not stay out so late, as she had to go to school the next day. At 1 a.m., the mother's concern reached a breaking point. She woke up her husband, and they set out in their car at 1:30 a.m. to search for Andrea. They spent hours searching the area around Bad Belzig but found nothing. They visited the youth center, but Andrea wasn't there. Andrea's friends were unable to provide a clear explanation for her disappearance. It was also unknown whether she went missing while heading to the club or after leaving it. Most partygoers had already left, and the remaining youths couldn't provide much information. Around 4 a.m., Andrea's frantic parents reported her disappearance to the local police. However, the police responded slowly and failed to conduct a timely search for Andrea. The police officers initially thought that Andrea had just gone out and would come back home by herself in the morning, once she was sober. However, her parents were certain that something terrible had happened to her. They knew Andrea wouldn't run away because she had no reason to do so. All Andrea's belongings and money were still at home, she wasn't dating anyone, and none of her friends had seen her that night. A week went by before the police started investigating Andrea's disappearance. Up until then, her parents had been searching the town on their own. They had contacted all the local hospitals, but none of them had any information about Andrea. As the search continued without any success, Andrea's parents became increasingly suspicious of a plot of land formerly owned by Andrea's ex-boyfriend's grandfather. Andrea and her ex-boyfriend had broken up shortly before she went missing. There were reports that her ex-boyfriend was struggling to cope with their breakup. The outside of the property appeared abandoned, except for a small, old shed that caught the attention of Andrea's parents. They suspected that Andrea's ex-boyfriend might be connected to her disappearance. They thought it was possible that he had ambushed her on her way to the club, attacked her, and taken her. The parents immediately contacted Andrea's ex-boyfriend, but he denied any involvement. He stated that he was at home for the entire evening and night, and his family members were ready to confirm his alibi. However, Andrea's family didn't believe him. The police were informed by Andrea's parents about a suspicious piece of land owned by her ex-boyfriend's grandfather, and they agreed to investigate. It wasn't until a week after Andrea's disappearance that the police took the investigation seriously. Detectives started questioning the people who were at the youth club on the night Andrea went missing. Many of the partygoers were friends and acquaintances of Andrea, but their statements didn't shed any light on the case. The teenagers who frequented the club often got their dates and days mixed up, making their accounts confusing and unclear. Some people claimed to have seen Andrea at the party, but others disagreed. Initially, investigators thought Andrea might have arrived at the party, then gotten lost in the crowd or left with someone she knew, or possibly been attacked. This theory seemed believable, given that parties with teenagers often involve alcohol, which can lead to incidents when people are leaving. However, after talking to more witnesses, it became clear that Andrea never actually made it to the party, which was confirmed by her friends who were waiting for her. Andrea, who was known for her beauty at school, didn't show up to meet her friends. Detectives believed the accounts from Andrea's closest friends were the most trustworthy. Police have thoroughly checked all routes Andrea might have taken to get to the club. They launched a large-scale search operation, involving trained dogs and many volunteers. Despite their extensive efforts, they couldn't find any signs of Andrea. Numerous press conferences and TV reports were held to ask citizens for help in finding Andrea and warning them of potential danger. Andrea's parents and law enforcement worked together to investigate her disappearance. They made appeals for negotiation in case she was abducted, set up hotlines for witness tips, and offered monetary rewards. However, all efforts were unsuccessful due to a lack of evidence or leads. Many tips were verified, but they turned out to be false. The detectives were only able to piece together a rough timeline of incident leading up to Andrea's disappearance. On the evening of Thursday, October 7, 1993, Andrea returned home from a shopping center with her parents around 6 p.m. She went to her room, listened to music, and looked at her new clothes. The family had dinner together, and Andrea planned to attend a party at the youth club afterwards. She tried to contact a friend to go together, but her friend was already at the club and couldn't be reached. Andrea decided to go alone, and her parents didn't know what she did next. Investigators suspected that Andrea may have been a victim of sexual assault. They thought that her attractive appearance might have caught the attention of a predator, leading to a crime. To investigate, detectives made a list of Andrea's ex-boyfriends and admirers, and checked their alibis. Investigation found that each of the suspects had a reliable alibi for the time of the incident, making it unlikely they were involved. Unfortunately, the surveillance system at the time was relatively underdeveloped, making the investigation more difficult. Detectives started looking for witnesses who might have seen what happened to Andrea. They found out that she had taken a shortcut to the club that evening, and several people had seen her along the way. According to their accounts, Andrea had passed by a group of young people and a couple of teenagers. But she didn't know any of them, so she just kept walking. The last people to see Andrea alive were two boys, 13-years-old Robin and 14-years-old David. By law, their identities and photos were kept private, but detectives were able to track them down and take their statements. The boys said they had simply nodded at Andrea and then gone their separate ways. After that, Andrea seemed to disappear. It became clear that Andrea never made it to the meeting spot with her friends, which meant something terrible must have happened to her on the way. The path she took was a little-known shortcut that mostly only local residents were familiar with. So, the search for suspects focused on people who lived in the nearby houses. Immediately, the police investigation focused on Robin and David, the two teenagers who were the last to see Andrea alive. Both boys came from difficult home environments and lived close to the Andrea family's residence. They were familiar with the path Andrea had taken. Although they were young, Robin and David had a history of minor crimes, including thefts and break-ins. However, there was not enough evidence to accuse them of a serious crime like assault and abduction. Due to Robin and David's young age, the suspicions against them were eventually dropped. The case stalled, and for the next 7 years, there were no new developments. Then, on July 7, 2000, a local resident stumbled upon a horrifying discovery while out for a walk. His dog found a human skull and brought it to him, laying it on the ground. At first, the man thought the skull was a ball, but after he realized it was actually a human skull that had been stripped of its flesh. The skull had a hole in the occipital bone. At first, the resident thought the dog had discovered old remains from World War II, as burials from that time were commonly found in the area. To be safe, the resident informed the police. When detectives received the news, they quickly went to the scene with search dogs. The location where the skull was found belonged to Andrea's former boyfriend. After a lengthy and thorough search, a complete human skeleton was found behind the door of a partially collapsed shed, hidden under a pile of construction debris. The skeleton's poor condition made initial identification impossible. Searching the nearby utility building did not turn up any clues, personal items, pieces of clothing, or other evidence. In recent years, the only person to have gone missing without a trace in the area was Andrea Lohajian. Consequently, most people immediately assumed the remains belonged to her. Andrea's parents described the outfit she wore on the day of her disappearance, including new black platform shoes and jeans purchased that day. However, none of these clothing items were discovered in the shed, which implies that the perpetrators likely got rid of them. It was also possible that Andrea's clothes were torn off shortly before her death, perhaps during an attempted assault. The remains were only identified as Andrea's after a thorough forensic examination, including an analysis of dental records. This allowed Andrea's family to learn the truth about her fate and give her a proper burial. However, it also sparked concerns about how thorough the initial searches were, since her body was found in an area that had already been searched before. A review of the search operation reports showed that investigators had examined the area, including an abandoned shed filled with debris, but they didn't find anything unusual at the time. It is possible that the body was hidden there later, but there is no evidence to confirm this. The investigation initially concentrated on the accounts of witnesses who claimed to have seen Andrea in the company of two teenagers, Robin and David, aged 13 to 14, just before her disappearance. Andrea's vanishing after being seen with Robin and David had seemed suspicious. The boys were questioned again and repeated that they had seen Andrea on the night she disappeared, but had only greeted her and had no involvement in her disappearance. Despite the lack of evidence, but the investigation still points to their involvement in Andrea's disappearance. It seemed unlikely that such young boys could be responsible for her murder, but their involvement couldn't be ruled out entirely. Further investigation revealed that the boys had a connection to the location where Andrea's remains were found. Witnesses had seen Robin and David near the shed on several occasions, and it was discovered that they had access to the inside of the abandoned building. Additionally, eyewitnesses reported seeing the boys at the entrance of the shed on the evening Andrea went missing, raising more questions and increasing suspicions about Robin and David's involvement in the crime. The investigation into the involvement of Robin and David in Andrea's disappearance was dropped due to insufficient evidence and their young age. At the time, detectives didn't think it was plausible for schoolboys to be involved in the crime. The search for Andrea continued. But authorities, media, and her family failed to uncover any valuable information. The case hit a dead end, and it was eventually shelved as unsolved. Without direct evidence pointing to a killer, detectives stopped their search. It wasn't until 2012, when new leadership took over the regional police department, that the case was reopened. Although new evidence and leads were discovered, there still wasn't enough proof to charge anyone. At this point, detectives didn't have a prime suspect. In May 2016, the case took a major turn when David, a 37-year-old man, died in Berlin from a serious pancreatic disease caused by years of drug addiction and unsettled lifestyle. He was one of the teenagers who had last seen Andrea alive. During a train trip, David suffered a fatal internal hemorrhage, and his death certificate listed natural causes, despite his extensive criminal history. Following David's death, a witness came forward to the authorities, claiming to have information that could solve Andrea's murder case. David's mother was a witness, but she concealed the disturbing truth about her son's involvement in the case. She revealed that on the evening of the murder in 1993, David, then 14, and his 13-year-old friend Robin encountered Andrea while walking on the same path. The two boys, drawn to Andrea's fashionable clothing, decided to attack and rob her. When Andrea recognized them in the darkness, fearing they would be exposed, Robin and David brutally killed her. The investigators were shocked by a sudden turn of events. They had previously suspected Robin and David of a crime, but lacked evidence to prosecute them. The boys' involvement was also questionable due to their young age. Until then, the boys, Robin and David, had gotten into only minor scrapes with the law and had managed to avoid punishment due to their youth. No one suspected that this lack of punishment would embolden them to commit more serious crimes. Years later, 36-year-old Robin was brought in for questioning. His former accomplice, David, had since passed away, so the police had to rely on Robin's testimony. Robin confessed to everything, including the gruesome details of the crime. He asked to speak with his family first, to confess to them, before providing a final statement to the investigators. The detectives agreed to give Robin 48 hours to meet with his family, appreciating his willingness to cooperate. However, they had no idea that Robin had already planned his next move. When he returned to his apartment, his wife was temporarily away. Robin left a note for his wife and a message for the police, detailing his involvement in the attack on Andrea Lohajian. Then, he disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, Robin was declared missing after he failed to show up. On November 4, 2016, a hunter discovered his body in the mountains. Robin's mutilated body was found at the bottom of a deep ravine. It appeared that Robin had taken his own life, so unable to cope with the guilt he committed in his youth. In his final note, Robin described the horrific details of the crime. Robin never knew why David started the attack, as David never shared his reasons with him. Despite this, Robin was able to recall the rest of what happened during the incident. According to Robin, they had no prior connection to the victim, Andrea Lohajian. When Andrea was walking along a small road near a club, she met Robin and David. The attack was a sudden and spontaneous act of aggression. Andrea probably chose that route to get to the party quickly and save time. When Robin thought back to the encounter, he remembered exchanging friendly greetings with Andrea alongside his friend David. Initially, Robin intended to continue his journey home, but his plans changed unexpectedly. David suddenly and aggressively attacked Andrea, catching both her and Robin off guard. After the assault, Robin and David concealed Andrea's body in a nearby outbuilding adjacent to the youth center. They covered the body with construction materials and then left the area. According to Robin's account, there was no apparent motive for the attack, such as theft or personal gain. The act seemed to be driven by a senseless and extreme aggression. Robin and David both had encounters with drug dealers while they were in school. Additionally, they were both under the influence of drugs on the night the incident occurred. Peter Lemon, the head of the youth center that Andrea was planning to visit, had fond memories of her. He described Andrea as a well-behaved guest who did not drink alcohol and mainly came to the center to play billiards and socialize with friends. Peter was deeply shocked by the violence against Andrea and provided full cooperation to the authorities investigating the incident. Peter had also been told about Robin and David. They often seen loitering near a shed a short distance from the club. There were numerous negative rumors going around about these boys, but Peter couldn't bring himself to believe that such young people were capable of committing such severe offenses. However, it turned out that these very juveniles had been roaming freely. For 20 years, Andrea's disappearance remained unsolved, despite a written confession from Robin and witness testimonies placing Robin and David near the scene of the crime. The investigation lacked direct evidence against the suspects, with no DNA or fingerprints found. Detectives carefully analyzed every word from Robin, including their social media posts and phone contents. The investigators were looking for clues that might suggest the suspects discussed or admitted to the crime. Shortly before his death, David's online accounts revealed ominous posts that seemed to hint at his involvement in Andrea's disappearance. But these leads were considered secondary evidence. It is presumed that David knew the investigation had reopened and was consumed by guilt. Although he did not intend to surrender to authorities, but his life had spiraled downward due to his struggle with drug addiction. David's mother believed her son's death was a sign from fate. She had been afraid to turn him in to the police, and David and his friend Robin were hesitant to share information about their past due to fear of revenge from people they used to associate with. This fear was legitimate considering David had a record of past violent behavior and convictions for drug crimes. Despite accumulating indirect evidence, one aspect of the case to horrify detectives: how could two ordinary 13 and 14 years old boys commit such a heinous crime against Andrea? As a result, Andrea's relatives and the investigators began to suspect that a third person, an adult, might have been involved in the crime, guiding Robin and David. The investigation revealed that Andrea's death was caused by a severe head injury from a blunt object. The severity of the injury suggests it would have taken considerable physical strength to inflict it. The detectives questioned whether Robin and David could overpower an older girl and inflict such an injury. This led them to consider the possibility of an adult accomplice, which was supported by other evidence. A new suspect emerged, a man associated with Robin and David's social circle, who was significantly older. However, his name was not disclosed. Robin's testimonies and pre-death note did not mention a third accomplice, and David's mother denied the possibility. Despite this, some witness statements suggested an adult was involved. Specifically, several witnesses reported seeing a truck driver around the same age as the suspect near the shed around the time of Andrea's disappearance. Investigators were able to identify this individual and connect him to the case. In reality, Andrea and her killers, Robin and David, attended the same school. However, due to their age difference, they didn't have classes, participate in the same activities, or have common friends. They may have crossed paths in the hallways or cafeteria. Andrea may have had prior conflicts with Robin and David that intensified their dislike for her. Robin and David both came from difficult and unstable families, which led them to start using alcohol and drugs at a young age as a way to cope. On the night of the incident, they may have been under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which could have made them more aggressive. What's more remarkable is that Andrea's remains were found on a plot of land owned by a relative of one of the killers, her ex-boyfriend's grandfather. Some people believe that this resemblance cannot be a coincidence, and they suspect the involvement of her ex-boyfriend in the case. The public was shocked and outraged when it was discovered that these very teenagers were involved in the murder. The revelation led to widespread criticism, mainly because detectives had initially dismissed the case in the 1990s, citing the suspect's youth as the reason. If detectives had investigated these teenagers as suspects at the time of the crimes, it is likely that the victims' bodies would have been discovered much sooner. An earlier investigation could have helped authorities bring the killers to justice. The autopsy results showed that Andrea had a fractured skull, but the object used to inflict the injury could not be identified. The investigation relied only on a few small bones of Andrea. All that remained of the skeleton had decomposed. The investigation into the juvenile criminals relied heavily on testimonies from David's mother and notes from Robin, as no direct physical evidence was available. One of the key concerns for detectives after reopening the case was whether David and Robin had committed any new crimes during the 20-plus years they were free. While it was unlikely, the detectives could not rule out this possibility. They spoke to local residents. However, the detectives did find a history of minor crimes committed by David and Robin. Further investigation into these incidents uncovered disturbing secrets. As detectives looked into Robin's potential involvement in a recent serious crime, they discovered a disturbing incident. In January 2014, a French student named Louise went missing after meeting with friends at the university hospital. Louise had arranged to meet her friends over the phone just before leaving home, but she never arrived. When Louise's friends tried calling her, her phone went unanswered. Assuming Louise had urgent matters to attend to, her friends went home, but when Louise didn't show up for work the next day without explanation, her friends became concerned, as this was unusual for her. Louise was a responsible person, but one evening her phone was unreachable, and her whereabouts were unknown. Later, Louise's body was later discovered, and the primary suspect in her murder was identified as Robin, a juvenile who had previously been linked to the murder of Andrea and had subsequently taken his own life. What made the situation even more disturbing was that Louise personally knew Robin, but she had no idea about his dark past. As a result, she became his second victim. Despite the suspicions, proving Robin's involvement in Louise's murder was difficult due to a lack of direct evidence. The case remains unsolved, and many have criticized police for dropping the investigation into Robin and David, suspects in Andrea's 1993 murder, citing the suspect's young age at the time. The carelessness shown in handling the case allowed criminals to commit new crimes with a high likelihood. Robin's past crimes were neglected, and his case was left unsolved, ultimately leading to the death of Louise. Years earlier, Andrea's body was left to decompose, and her case was also neglected. The Andrea family feels that the young perpetrators didn't get the punishment they deserved for their crimes. Even though the killers are dead, but they were still able to live freely for a time and experience the simple joys of life. The motives behind Andrea's murder, like many other details of the case, remain unknown due to a lack of evidence. This case shows that the idea that young people are not capable of carrying out serious crimes is incorrect. Although the truth will eventually come to light, it may be too late to deliver justice. Andrea's youth, full of promise and dreams for the future, was tragically taken. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by 2014. They got married in 2003, after dating for about 5 years. In 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, she found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, 4 months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her, then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davison, Kathy asked Davison police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his co-worker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed, and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A co-worker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a coworker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the coworker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the coworker refused to talk to him further. The coworker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging and that the coworker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the coworker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The coworker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway. But Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning, he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women Jason had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident. Because there were no injection marks on Christina's body and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina's cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gena's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, Prosecutor, you are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation. And those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Dr. Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Dr. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse. Instead, he insisted that he was innocent. The judge said, "The jury did not believe your lies," ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, Prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layden went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Morgan. Alexandra Morgan, known as Alexandra to friends and family, is a single mother of 2 children, aged 4 and 11. They live in Wilsley Pound, Cranbrook, Kent. Alexandra has lost contact with the children's father and has had to raise them on her own, which has not been easy. According to some sources, she works as a dog groomer. Alexandra is described as a dynamic and ambitious woman who is always looking after her children. She wants her children to have a better life and has worked hard to achieve it. On November 13, 2021, Alexandra met her parents and left her children in their care. She said she was going on a spa holiday with friends for 3 days. However, by November 17, Alexandra had not returned to pick up her children as scheduled. Her parents began to worry because they could not contact Alexandra by phone or text, which was very unusual. After several unsuccessful attempts to find their daughter, they decided to report Alexandra missing to the police. Kent police suspect that Alexandra Morgan's disappearance is related to a crime. They began their investigation by looking into the spa where Alexandra said she was going to go with friends. The police also wanted to identify these friends. Start an investigation. Police have obtained video footage from a gas station in Cranbrook where Alexandra was last seen. They are trying to locate her by looking for her white Mini Cooper. On the morning of November 14th, Alexandra went to the gas station to fill up, made a few purchases, and then left. The video shows nothing unusual. Rose McCauley, the petrol station manager who has known Alexandra for 17 years, was there when Alexandra bought £10 worth of petrol, a cup of coffee and a snack on the morning she went missing. Rose said that no one knew what had happened to her or where she had gone. Rose continued that a friend and she had searched all over Hastings, but Alexandra was nowhere to be seen. She said that Alexandra wasn't shy, so she didn't think Alexandra was scared to go home. Rose just hoped nothing bad had happened and that Alexandra would get back safely. It was worrying, she added. When Alexandra arrived that Sunday morning, she was very well dressed, with more makeup than usual, her hair done and some eye-catching clothes. She arrived earlier than usual, looking happy and smiling. Alexandra's friends mentioned that in 2018, she shared on social media about being stalked by a stalker. In 2019, she posted a photo with the caption, "Hello Stalker," and included a message asking the stalker to stop following her page. A police spokesman said that it was unusual for Alexandra to have not contacted her family and that they were treating it as a possible murder. As the investigation continued, they were appealing for anyone who might have seen Alexandra or her white Mini Cooper with a black top to contact them. He added that even if people were not sure what they saw, they should report any suspicious information. Alexandra was described as a woman approximately 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with shoulder-length brown hair. She was last seen wearing a knee-length green quilted jacket, a black top underneath, ripped blue jeans, knee-high black boots, and a silver necklace. Usually, when someone goes missing, they don't leave any traces behind to help the police investigate. Many missing cases remain unsolved. However, Alexandra Morgan's case is different. She left behind the last digital traces that helped the police find clues to her fate. Not only that, these traces also revealed some shocking secrets. Further investigation helped the police find out more information about Alexandra. She wanted to improve her finances, so she started working as a call girl and advertised her services online, without telling her family and friends. Women in this profession are among the most vulnerable. Everyone knows that they face risks, because it is impossible to know in advance whether the next customer is normal or dangerous. This job is unsafe. According to the investigation, Alexandra had an appointment with a regular customer before she went missing. The police have arrested this man. On November 25, 2021, they arrested a 40-year-old man, Mark Brown, from St. Leonards-on-Sea on suspicion of murder. Mark Brown, a construction worker who is married with a son. His family were completely unaware of his secret life. Sussex police said that before Alexandra went missing, she had met Mark several times, and he had even bought her a Mini Cooper. Their first meeting took place on June 8, 2021, after Mark spotted her on an adult website. They met at her home in Sissinghurst, near Cranbrook, Kent. Things went well, and they continued to meet occasionally after that. The second meeting took place on June 21, nearly 2 weeks later. This time, Alexandra went to Little Bridge Farm near Hastings, Kent, a property Mark rented to meet women and for other purposes. They met 7 more times in August and September. Alexandra did not realize she was falling into a trap. On October 23, 2021, Mark sent her a text message asking if she would like to engage in a risk-free business transaction. He made an offer that involved £100,000 for 35 days at a hotel he would protect, a new ID, a straight car, and money for shopping. Mark asked her to do some simple tasks: go out for a smoke, pack the money, and buy a few things. After receiving this offer, Alexandra did some online research, which showed that she wanted to improve her children's lives. She learned about the minimum deposit for buying a house in 2021. Alexandra also intended to use the money to start a business. She searched for information such as profits from opening a sunbed shop in the UK and taxes to pay on £100,000. These actions showed Alexandra's character and desire to improve her life. Alexandra lied to her parents that she was going to the spa with friends, but in fact she was planning to meet Mark at the farm. On the morning of November 14th, she left home and was recorded on CCTV buying petrol in Cranbrook at 7:20 a.m. She arrived at Little Bridge Farm at around 8 a.m. 3 days later, on November 17th, Mark drove Alexandra's car to Holmhurst Lane, St. Leonards, after replacing the real number plates with fake ones. The following day, November 18th, Alexandra's mother reported her daughter to the police because she had not picked her up and had stopped communicating. On November 23rd, police discovered CCTV footage of Alexandra's car following Mark's Jaguar to Little Bridge Farm. Kent police sealed off the entrance to the farm and interviewed Mark. He admitted meeting Alexandra but claimed she had left after 45 minutes. Mark agreed to allow police to take his fingerprints and DNA. 2 days later, on November 25th, police arrested Mark as the prime suspect in Alexandra Morgan's disappearance. Before we get into what happened to Alexandra, we need to go back to when she met Mark Brown. At that time, Mark had a wife named Leah Ware. She was 33, and she was a mother of 3 who does not have custody of her children. Leah first met Mark on March 25, 2018, through a prostitution website where she advertised her services. A few years later, this same website is where Mark met Alexandra Morgan. In late 2018, Mark and Leah began a relationship and moved into an apartment together. After 6 months, when their lease expired, Leah moved into a shipping container at Mark's Little Bridge farm. Mark describes their relationship as a roller coaster of ups and downs. Leah has had a complicated life. She received weekly benefits, which were usually administered by Mark. She had a history of drug use and mental illness, but many said she was trying to improve herself in order to gain custody of her children. Mark and Leah were in a 3-year relationship before Leah mysteriously disappeared in May 2021. On the evening of May 5th and early morning of May 6th, Leah was with Jack Tyler, a friend and convicted drug dealer. They used drugs together and had an intimate relationship that night. This was the last time anyone saw Leah. The last call from her phone was made at 8:55 a.m. on May 7th. Police believe Leah died that day. On June 8, 2021, Mark met Alexandra for the first time at her home. The meeting went well and Alexandra found Mark to be a reasonable and generous man. However, she did not know that just a month earlier, Leah, who had been in a relationship with Mark, had disappeared without a trace. During the investigation, detectives discovered important text messages from Mark. He sent them to his ex-girlfriend from high school 5 days after meeting Alexandra Morgan. However, the content of the messages had nothing to do with Alexandra and were about Leah. The message reads, "I'll try to be careful. This happened recently. It's a nasty thing to get rid of. Just an old oil drum, 5 liters of diesel, and everything is gone. It burns so hot, it almost glows white. My actions are heartbreaking. It's ironic that a psychopath has a conscience. Investigators suspect Alexandra Morgan is dead and may not be Mark's only victim. Sussex police are appealing to the public for help in locating Leah or her body, as well as any information relating to her disappearance." After arresting Mark on November 25, 2021, police searched his farm and found a container that showed signs of having been recently burned. Inside the container, experts found bone and tooth remains. Tests confirmed that these were those of Alexandra Morgan. In a joint statement, Kent and Sussex police expressed their condolences to Alexandra and Leah's families. They confirmed that Alexandra's remains had been found, but Leah's remains have not yet been found. The investigation is ongoing and police are appealing for anyone with information. Police describe Leah as a white woman, 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with very long black hair and blue eyes. She had 3 tattoos, a dragon on her right leg, Chinese characters on her right hip, and a fairy sitting on a flower with the name Ryan on her right leg. The search of Mark's house lasted about a month and ended on January 7, 2022. During the investigation, police discovered the skeleton of a Pomeranian dog at the bottom of the pond, with a heavy object tied to its neck. Investigators believe this was Leah's dog, which Mark threw into the pond after killing Leah. On February 1, 2022, police charged Mark with the murder of Leah Ware, although they did not find her remains. Mark had previously been charged with the murder of Alexandra Morgan. Mark initially denied all charges. However, when police presented evidence of him burning Alexandra Morgan's body, Mark admitted to Alexandra's death, but maintained that it was an accident. Mark Brown's trial began on October 17, 2022. During the trial, new information about the 2 cases was revealed. The jury heard that after Leah Ware went missing on May 7, 2021, Mark regularly used her new bank card to withdraw money from her account each week. The bank card was sent to the address of his sister Cheryl. In July 2021, the jury was informed that Mark had twice withdrawn £200 from Leah Ware's account shortly after transferring £200 into his own. When asked why, Mark explained that he could have used her £200 and then paid it back, as at that point, someone owed him £430, so he could have paid it back. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson asked if it was a coincidence that Leah had died after getting a new bank card. A surprised Mark replied that he didn't understand what Duncan meant and that, as far as he knew, Leah was still alive. Duncan continued by asking if Mark was trying to take Ms. Leah's money and pointed out that Leah was in a place where money didn't mean anything. Mark was confused and said he didn't understand what Duncan was talking about at all, adding that it sounded like they were talking about two different people. During the trial for Alexandra Morgan's death, Mark maintained that it was an accident. He explained that Alexandra slipped and fell on a piece of equipment in the workshop he rented at Little Bridge Farm, causing her to hit her head. When he rushed to her, he found Alexandra bleeding profusely. He grabbed a towel to try to stop the bleeding. But when he lifted her head to put the towel under, more blood came out. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson objected to the defendant's testimony, stating that when the defendant first saw the victim lying on her back on the ground, there was a lot of blood around her head. This clearly showed that she was seriously injured and needed immediate help, especially medical attention. This was obvious before the defendant did anything else. Mark replied that he was panicking and his first reaction was to grab a towel to stop the bleeding. After performing CPR and checking for breathing by holding a mirror to Alexandra Morgan's mouth and nose, Mark confirmed that she was dead. Over the next 5 minutes, he did 3 things. He used his sweater to block the blood, he went outside to vomit, and he retrieved his phone to call 911. He explained that he then decided to cover up the whole thing by wrapping Alexandra in a sleeping bag and wrapping a towel around her head to stop the bleeding. He questioned how he could prove it was an accident and admitted that the decision to cover it up was stupid and the worst mistake of his life. Mark then decided to dispose of Alexandra's body using an incinerator he had built from an old oil drum earlier that year and which he had often used to burn rubbish. "I had heard stories about burning dead bodies," he said, "and I didn't want anyone to stumble upon a body lying around." Mark therefore maintained that he had nothing to do with Leah Ware's disappearance and believed she was still alive, while Alexandra's death was assumed an accident. At the trial, the court heard testimony from Mark's boss, Alan, who said that Mark had warned him that the police might come to arrest him. This conversation took place on November 24th. When Alan asked why the police might arrest him, Mark replied, "For double murder." This answer was significant because Mark implicitly admitted that Leah Ware was dead and that Alexandra Morgan's death was not an accident. Mark denied those words, claiming he only mentioned a 25-year sentence for one murder, not a double murder. Prosecutor Duncan asked about the murder, and Mark admitted his feelings about Alexandra's case made him act as he did, despite his inability to prove his innocence. The jury also heard that Mark had deliberately smeared Alexandra and Leah reputations, as the prosecutor put it, to create a false image of the women. What people should remember about Leah and Alexandra is that they were always smiling and happy in life. They both deserve to be remembered by their loved ones for the wonderful qualities they were. On December 1st, 2022, a jury of 12 found Mark, 41, guilty on all counts. Judge Nicholas Hilliard said, "This is an extremely serious case and the impact on the victim's family is immeasurable." He announced that Mark would be sentenced to life in prison and that he would have to decide what minimum time Mark should serve, or even whether to grant clemency. The judge stressed that if Mark revealed what he had done to Leah Ware's body, he would take that information into account when sentencing. However, Mark did not take this opportunity. Before the judge delivered his verdict, the court heard from Leah Ware's mother, Rebecca Martin, about the impact the case had had on the family. "Mark continues to cause our family pain by not revealing what happened. Leah lost her life because Mark Brown wanted to satisfy his dark desires," she said. "He controlled and manipulated every aspect of her life. When she was no longer of any value, he abandoned her like a lifeless object. The court also heard from Alexandra Morgan's parents, who said Alexandra was intelligent, energetic, and determined to succeed. Despite the challenges she faced, she overcame them and held out hope for her future and the child she loved dearly. On January 13, 2023, the court sentenced Mark Brown to 2 life terms. He will be eligible for parole after 49 years. Judge Hilliard imposed the sentence in absentia because Mark refused to appear. He said, "No sentence can ever measure the number of lives lost. Nothing can undo the defendant's actions, it cannot. His conscience is not troubled by what he has done." Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel McLean. Rachel McLean returned home to Blackpool, UK, for the summer of 1990. She was 18 years old and had just finished her first year at Oxford. Rachel was very busy with her studies and spent all her free time studying. She had a healthy lifestyle and played sports. Rachel had many friends and loved heavy metal music. She joined a local charity, where she worked during the summer. While on a day off, Rachel was relaxing with friends at a local club when she met a bartender named John Turner, who had long brown hair. John was from Nottingham and had returned to Blackpool for the summer. Rachel found him attractive and easy to talk to, so they quickly became interested in each other. That night, they chatted. John attended Rachel's 19th birthday party. After the party, they had a passionate night together. According to John, their relationship continued to develop. However, at the end of the summer, Rachel had to return to Oxford, and John returned to Nottingham. The two cities were just over 2 hours' drive apart, so they could easily visit each other. They spent weekends together and kept in touch by letter and phone during the week. John wrote Rachel long love letters, which she enjoyed. John Turner was born in HMP, but as a child he moved to New Zealand with his parents and settled in a city called Bath. The family lived in 2 countries before John returned to the UK to study at King's College. During his time there, he won the hearts of both students and teachers. He hosted a show on the local college radio station twice a week and was a talented athlete on the soccer team. Rachel McLean was a promising student. Her literature teacher at college admired her achievements. Rachel started college in the same year as John. On Christmas, Rachel invited John to meet her parents and they had a nice evening together. Rachel's parents were very happy with her choice, finding John intelligent, good-looking and confident. John became increasingly infatuated with Rachel but was saddened by the distance between them. During this time, she moved into a student apartment on the first floor of the school with 4 other students. John felt anxious and jealous because one of her neighbors was a man and the boys often visited her house. To cope, he wrote and called her constantly. However, Rachel was very busy with work and study. Since there were no mobile phones in those days, they could only communicate by landline. She would often come home at the end of the evening, exhausted, and go straight to bed. She did not have the opportunity to communicate with John regularly. His dissatisfaction increased with each missed call and he became increasingly jealous. His possessiveness became evident during this time and he complained to her, which began to annoy Rachel. On February 11th, she sent him a Valentine's card, calling him the only love of her life. However, around that time, she wrote in her diary about her lover in very unflattering terms. It seemed that she had doubts about whether John was the person she could spend the rest of her life with. On Valentine's Day, John proposed to her, but she unexpectedly refused, which shocked him. She explained that she was not ready. John said that he understood and would wait. They continued their relationship, calling each other occasionally and rarely seeing each other. 2 months later, in April, they planned to spend the Easter holidays together. John went to Blackpool again on Saturday, and Rachel's mother took her back to Oxford because she had important school matters to attend to on Sunday. They planned to have a quiet day together at her student flat, as it was their last weekend before Rachel's exams. Rachel spent a lot of time preparing for her exams. While she was studying, her boyfriend was watching football in the living room because he was a Nottingham fan. That weekend, the team played in the FA Cup semi-finals, so the next day John got on the train and returned to Nottingham. There was no one in the student flat all week because the young people had gone home for the holidays. Everyone wanted to spend time with their loved ones because they wouldn't have the chance until the end of the year. By Monday, her roommates began to return, eager to see Rachel and hear about her weekend. However, Rachel was missing. Her room was empty, the windows were open, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. The students assumed she was busy with other activities. On Wednesday, her boyfriend, John, tried to call her, but she did not answer. They had planned to stay in touch, but Rachel did not return his calls. John assumed that she was busy and did not want to bother her. However, after 2 days of silence, which was unusual since their relationship had only recently improved, John began to worry. He called again, but still received no response. The next day, he tried again, but was unsuccessful. There was no social media at the time, so John left a message on her answering machine. But she remained silent. He also sent her a letter by regular mail, which he sent as soon as he got home. The letter arrived in New Mexico on Thursday, and John thanked Rachel for a wonderful weekend and wished her luck with her exams. On April 19, 1991, 19-year-old Rachel failed to show up for her exam, which was especially worrying because she had been studying hard and the exam was extremely important to her. When the exam proctors tried to contact her, they were unsuccessful. Her parents also had no idea where she was, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The Oxford police were initially skeptical. They received dozens of missing student reports each month because parents went to the police station after parties. In 99% of cases, teens sobered up from drinking and returned to school within 24 hours. But that was not the case. This diligent student had been missing for days and had not been heard from at all. None of her friends knew where she was, so the police became interested in what had happened. They immediately went to the apartment where Rachel had gone missing. Detective Susie Krug was looking for information about the students who had been in the same room as Rachel. Victoria Clare, Margaret Smith, Sarah Hume, and John Forby. The friends immediately pointed to Rachel's boyfriend, who was annoying everyone with his jealousy. They showed a letter he had sent from Nottingham around the time Rachel went missing. The neighbors also confirmed that John Turner was the last person Rachel had been in contact with. The room they checked showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, struggle, or blood. Everything was in its place. The police found Rachel's diary, which might contain important clues. The police began to study the contents of the diary. They knew that John was possessive and jealous of his girlfriend, wanting to know her whereabouts and presence at all times. This behavior gradually began to annoy Rachel. Their conflicts often arose over this issue. On April 22, police met with John Turner. 22. During the conversation, John expressed concern about his missing girlfriend. He was asked to describe his activities during the time Rachel went missing. John mentioned that they had a great weekend together and that everything was fine before they broke up. He said that he woke up early, showered, and that they had sex in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to Oxford Station together at around 4:15 p.m., taking a bus. They had a few hours before their train arrived, and while waiting, they bumped into a friend of Rachel's at around 5 p.m. The three of them went to a local coffee shop and had coffee. Rachel's friend was described as a dark-skinned man with long hair, wearing ripped jeans and a black jacket. He was similar in appearance to John, except for his dark skin. John admitted that he could not remember the man's name because they had just met and he did not expect to become friends with him. According to John, the man offered to drive Rachel home in his car. She agreed, and then John and Rachel said goodbye. John returned to Nottingham, while Rachel went with her friend to her apartment. However, John's story about the man was very suspicious. The police suspected that John was lying, and he quickly became the prime suspect in Rachel's disappearance, as she had been missing for a long time, leading to concerns that she might be dead or imprisoned. Urgent action was needed. First, it was important to learn more about the prime suspect, as he was the last known person to have had contact with Rachel, and his story about a black man needed further investigation. Rachel's disappearance left everyone baffled because none of her roommates or friends remembered her having such a friend. In order to gather more witnesses, the police shared information about the case. From the beginning, there was no reason to think that she had run away. The police first checked this possibility by talking to Rachel's family and friends. Rachel had no problems with her loved ones, friends, studies, or personal life. She was eagerly preparing for exams, which made it impossible for her to not attend. Rachel never complained about any problems, nor did she suffer from drug addiction or mental problems. People like her usually do not run away, and all of her belongings were left untouched. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility that she had run away on purpose. The police were skeptical of John's testimony and assigned a police officer to approach him and gain his trust. The officer's job was to observe John's reactions and behavior while updating him on the investigation. From the beginning, the officer suspected John of lying to them, noticing that he became nervous when talking about Rachel, despite his attempts to hide it. Despite these suspicions, a week of surveillance did not reveal any useful information to help the case. Meanwhile, the police were searching the neighborhood for witnesses, K9 units were working with dogs, and divers were examining local waters. Several people remembered seeing John, but no one could confirm that he had left the house with Rachel. In addition, he had not been behaving suspiciously, so this witness's testimony did not add anything to the search. During this time, John continued to cooperate with the investigation. He even helped create a composite sketch of the man who, according to him, was supposed to drive Rachel back to her apartment. John believes this friend was responsible for her abduction. It has now been 2 weeks and police believe she is no longer alive. No ransom demands have been made, ruling out kidnapping as a motive. Search teams, including police, rescue workers, and volunteers, have scoured a large area around Oxford, including drains and boating holes, but their efforts have been in vain. The police examined Rachel's diary and discovered her true feelings for John, a disturbing mix of hatred and pity. She expressed that she was unable to confront him directly or leave because she was afraid. Rachel had no genuine feelings for John, and her Valentine's Day gestures were more like a duty than a genuine expression of love. She knew that John was unstable and prone to losing control when angry. Afraid to face this reality, she admitted that their closeness was harmful and needed to end. In stark contrast, John described their relationship as happy, often emphasizing their frequent sexual activity during interrogations. Meanwhile, Rachel wrote of her disgust for him but felt powerless to stop their closeness. The police believe he may have killed her after reading her diary and discovering her true feelings, but more evidence is needed to prove his guilt. John has been actively cooperating with the investigation. He has attended a press conference to draw public attention to the search for Rachel and to help reconstruct the last day he spent with her. John describes the events at the station, claiming that a stranger, whom he says was a dark-skinned friend of Rachel's, was involved in her disappearance. The plan is to closely monitor John's reactions and behavior during these events. as experienced journalists can identify inconsistencies in his story. Many people have noted that John's description of the dark-skinned guy closely matches his appearance, including his clothing, except for his skin color. It is as if he was trying to describe himself but changing his race. In addition, the public took note of John's strange reactions when asked if he thought Rachel was still alive. He vaguely stated, in his heart, he wanted to think so, which further aroused suspicion among the conference attendees. Throughout the conversation, the guy's smile never seemed to disappear. This event greatly promoted the investigation into Rachel's disappearance. Several random witnesses who were watching the press conference on television clearly remembered the events of the day the girl disappeared at the train station. They contacted the police, saying that only John was at the cafe at the station, there was no girl or anyone else with him. Among the witnesses was a man sitting at the next table. He noticed that John seemed very nervous while drinking coffee, constantly looking around and startled. According to this witness, at one point, John took out a piece of paper and started writing. Perhaps Rachel was no longer alive at that time, and John began writing the same letter he had sent immediately after arriving in Notting. All this was done to create an alibi for himself. It has been established that John and Rachel went to the station together by bus, although there were no cameras there at that time. However, during that time in the city, all passengers who boarded the bus and paid for their tickets were monitored by special electronic devices. It was impossible to ride without paying. When checked, it was discovered that Rachel had not paid for the trip, which showed that she was not with John and could not have been there that day. Therefore, John lied. The reason for his lie remains unclear, and it is still unknown where Rachel's body could be. Police suspected that her remains might still be in the student apartment or somewhere on campus. Surveillance cameras covered the area around the building, but none of them showed John carrying any large, suspicious items. Police requested a floor plan of the student dormitory and discovered that there were voids under the floorboards. Police returned to the apartment where Rachel had lived and removed the floorboards. There, they found her body tightly packed in a bag, only 20 centimeters high. The cold weather at the time slowed the body's decomposition. In addition, the space between floors was structurally well ventilated, so the decomposing body did not emit a foul odor and was not discovered until 19 days after her death. Because Rachel's body was so well preserved, the forensic expert was able to determine the circumstances of her death with a high degree of accuracy within an hour. John was then questioned by the police. Initially, he refused to answer police questions. However, the next day, he confessed to killing Rachel. He said that after watching a football match, he proposed to Rachel, hoping that she would accept, but she refused. The couple exchanged a few words. As a result, he lost his temper and attacked her. In his confession, John admitted that he did not understand why she refused to get engaged. She did not want to answer for a long time but finally admitted that she had been having an affair and that she was not sure that she was ready to commit her life to John. In response, he insulted her. Rachel tried to hit him, and after the slap, he lost control and pinned her down on the chair with his weight, preventing her from moving. John claimed that he did not remember what happened next. When he regained consciousness, he found himself sitting on a couch in front of Rachel's lifeless body. Forensic experts confirmed that Rachel had been strangled. There was a deep, thin mark on her neck, indicating the use of an object rather than hands. The tie Rachel had given him for Christmas was missing from the crime scene and from John's belongings. Believed to have been used to kill her. After a while, he decided to dispose of the body. Unable to get the body out of the building, he put it in a bag, removed the floorboards from Rachel's room, and stuffed the body into a small space. He then quietly reinstalled the floorboards. John then packed his things and headed to the bus station. While waiting for the train at a coffee shop, he wrote a letter to Rachel. In the letter, he thanked her for the weekend they spent together and mentioned a black man who was supposed to drive her home, which was a made-up story. He had invented this character to support the lie he had created. He also expressed concern for his girlfriend, who would be alone for several days. After sending the letter, he called her several times and left messages on her answering machine. John then wrote another letter, addressed to Rachel in New Mexico, saying that he had tried to call her several times during the week and was very worried, hoping she would call back soon. This deception allowed him to fool the police and the public for 19 days. Afterward, despite his confession, John Turner maintained his innocence. In December 1991, John claimed that his actions were in self-defense. He wanted to avoid a life sentence for premeditated murder, so he argued that the girl's death was accidental. Rachel was described as argumentative and unfaithful, often insulting John. John also stressed the humiliation he suffered at the hands of Rachel. He had erectile dysfunction due to the disease and claimed that she constantly criticized him for it. This was especially difficult during the outbreak when he was unable to have sex with her due to pain in his groin and abdomen. In court, his lawyer portrayed him as the victim. He was a caring man in love, dreamed of marrying Rachel and proposed to her twice, both times being rejected. Of course, all of this is not true, because judging by the diary entries, the girl was generally uncomfortable with intimate contact with John. There is no evidence that Rachel had any intrigue or relationship with anyone else. Rachel's close friends did not know about any other guy. Many believe that she made up the story of the affair to justify her quick breakup with John, but it is possible that she never actually said this, it was just his word. In the end, the jury did not believe John and he was sentenced to life in prison, with the right to parole. John's story does not end there. While serving his sentence, he developed a relationship with a 20-year-old woman who looked exactly like Rachel. She learned about him through a newspaper article and became interested, believing that he had been wrongly convicted. Despite being imprisoned, they began a romantic relationship. Lawyers continued to fight for John's release and maintained his innocence. In 2003, after 11 years behind bars, John was paroled. He returned to New Zealand, intending to start his life over. His girlfriend, whom he met while in prison, followed him to New Zealand to attend university in Wanganui, the city where John lived. Apparently, 11 years in prison did not benefit John because he then attacked and began strangling the new girl, who believed he was innocent. John was 49 at the time. Fortunately, the attack was not serious and the girl was able to escape without serious injury. According to several witnesses and victims, John had lost control of his temper several times in the 6 months leading up to the incident. It was clear that he had anger management issues. John often became jealous and turned small problems into big arguments, often insulting his partner in front of others. Some time after the initial incident, the situation recurred and he attacked her again. During this time, the couple were staying at a motel in the city of Wanganui. There, they argued again. John threw his girlfriend onto the bed, raised his fists and punched her in the face while holding her down with his weight. However, he regained his composure and left the room. A few hours later, the girl texted John, saying that she was ending the relationship. She said that he was dangerous and needed to attend an anger management program. In response, he flew into a rage again, returned to the motel and stormed into the room. He attacked her, tore her clothes off, demanded sex, hit her on the head several times and threatened to kill her. In 2018, the girl reported John to the police and he was charged with assault. He was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. The sentence was relatively light because the conviction occurred in New Zealand. If the attack had happened in the UK, he would have faced a life sentence. Despite the attack, his new girlfriend told the media that she believes anger management is still an issue for John and that he needs help. She hopes he can control his anger and that they can rekindle their relationship, despite the mental and physical abuse he has inflicted on her. In court, she admitted that he had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him, although she did not take the threat seriously. John has recently been released from prison, but his current situation is unknown. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Taylor Wright. Taylor Wright was born on April 23, 1988. Friends and family described her as energetic and full of life. She was kind and empathetic, spending most of her life in North Carolina as she pursued her American dream. Taylor married Jeff Wright and later had a son named Drake. She earned a college degree and worked as an officer at the local police station, where she solved numerous crimes and was respected. To the outside world, Taylor's life seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a son, and a respected job. However, the reality was that not everything in her life was as idyllic as it appeared. Taylor's close friends knew that she smoked marijuana occasionally, but she kept it a secret. During her time in the police force, she used it to manage stress and her heavy workload. She claimed that she didn't smoke regularly, only occasionally to relax after a long day. However, Jeff found out about her secret and left with her son after their divorce. This made Taylor realize that she needed to change her life. In 2016, Taylor decided to start over and moved to Pensacola, Florida, a small resort town with a population of about 52,000. She likes the warm, comfortable atmosphere here. After quitting her job, she began working as a private investigator. Armed with the knowledge and experience from her previous job, she was eager to apply her skills to help her clients. Taylor divorced her husband, but faced two major challenges: child custody and financial issues. Court proceedings to divide assets and child custody were ongoing. It was a complicated divorce, and despite her efforts to reach an agreement, they were unable to reach an agreement, which dragged on. In September 2017, frustrated by financial disputes, Taylor withdrew money from her bank account without telling Jeff. The money, which was her personal savings, was something she did not want to share with Jeff. After withdrawing the money, she gave it to a friend to keep. One of Taylor's friends, Ashley MacArthur, is the main character in this story. Taylor has known Ashley, a forensic scientist, for over a year. Although it was a relatively short period of time, they became very close, to the point where Taylor entrusted Ashley with a large sum of money. Ashley agreed to help and was supposed to deposit the money in a safe deposit box, keeping it a secret from Jeff until Taylor was ready to use it. However, she soon needed money to pay for a lawyer. When Taylor reached out to Ashley, she noticed that Ashley always had excuses for delaying the return of the money or only giving her small amounts. Ashley claimed she was having trouble withdrawing the funds or that there were issues with the bank. During this time, Taylor grew increasingly suspicious that something was wrong and worried that her money might have been spent. Despite Taylor's persistent requests for the full amount to be returned, Ashley continued to provide various excuses. On the evening of September 7, 2017, Taylor and her friend Cassandra Waller went out to dinner. Cassandra had quickly become close friends after Taylor moved to the area. Cassandra was new to the city and Taylor suggested they rent an apartment together. Cassandra, a kind teacher, agreed. Over time, they developed a strong friendship. During dinner, Taylor shared her financial concerns, especially about her friend Ashley, who she believed was intentionally delaying repayment of money. Taylor expressed concern that Ashley might have spent the money or not want to pay it back. This made Taylor very anxious and stressed because she desperately needed the money to hire a good lawyer. That evening, Cassandra comforted Taylor, reassuring her that the matter would eventually be resolved, although she also had doubts about whether the money was still there. Taylor mentioned that she had scheduled a meeting with Ashley the next day, September 8th, to go to the bank together. On the morning of September 8th, as Cassandra was getting ready for work, she said goodbye to Taylor. And on her way out of the house, she saw Ashley's sitting car in the driveway. They were finally ready to take care of their banking issues. The girls said goodbye, and Cassandra drove off to school. Later that day, Ashley called Cassandra to inform her that she and Taylor had decided not to go to the bank, opting instead to go to the farm. This confused Cassandra, as she knew Taylor was in dire need of money. The night before, Taylor had been very stressed and emotional at dinner, eager to get her financial situation sorted out. Ashley explained that she and Taylor had been discussing Taylor's struggles. Ashley suggested that horseback riding might help Taylor improve spirit, therefore them to cancel their bank trip and plan an alternative vacation. This explanation seemed strange to Cassandra, but she wished them luck anyway. However, after the call, Cassandra attempted to contact Taylor but received no response to her calls or messages. Later on, Cassandra received a text from Taylor, who said she couldn't talk at the moment but would call back later. Taylor explained that she was feeling uncertain and depressed due to her divorce and the changes in her life, and that she was going out of town for a few days. Cassandra believed her and decided to give her friend some space. A couple of days later, Cassandra reached out again, asking Taylor to return home as soon as she could. After that, she received no response. As the days passed, Cassandra tried to contact Taylor several times, but Taylor continued to ignore her calls and texts, even though some of the messages were marked as read. Taylor did not return home, and all of her belongings were still intact, which made Cassandra increasingly worried about her friend's safety. Cassandra wanted to see Taylor to make sure she was okay. Their neighbor said that Taylor had used drugs in the past and that she could become withdrawn during difficult times. With the difficulties Taylor was having, Cassandra was worried that she might relapse. Cassandra was feeling anxious. A week had gone by with no news, and waiting seemed pointless. Concerned, her reached out to the police. She told the officers that something was off, as Taylor was behaving unusually and had completely disappeared without explanation. In their shared apartment, there were numerous personal items belonging to Taylor that she would have taken if she had moved. There was no valid reason for her to ignore her friend's calls. Until now, Taylor had never done anything like this. After hearing Cassandra's story, the police took note of the unusual aspects of the case. The police focused on the time frame of her disappearance. Naturally, they interviewed Cassandra first, since she lived in the same house as Taylor and had a close relationship with her. Meanwhile, searches were conducted in the apartment that Cassandra shared with Taylor. In the apartment, the police found Taylor's identification, some cash, and an unloaded revolver. Cassandra explained that they kept weapons in the house for self-defense, but they had never used them. There was nothing else suspicious found, but it was evident that Taylor could not have left for an extended period without her documents, money, and belongings. Cassandra was questioned several times, and she quickly felt that the police suspected her and shifted their focus to proving her innocence. Despite this, she continued to cooperate with the investigation because she wanted to find out the truth. Eventually, she was ruled out as a suspect. Police initially focused on Jeff, given their contentious divorce, which involved the division of assets and custody of their son. Jeff certainly had a strong motive to harm Taylor, but police quickly determined that he was in North Carolina at the time of her disappearance and had not left the city. He had recently remarried and was focused on building a new life, with little regard for his ex-wife. Family members confirmed that despite their divorce, Jeff and Taylor remained on good terms for the sake of their 6-year-old son. Jeff was known to be non-confrontational and had never harmed Taylor. He was not even aware that she had withdrawn money and tried to conceal it. Therefore, there was no reason for him to be angry with her, prompting police to immediately eliminate him as a potential suspect. The police then decide to talk to Ashley, whom Cassandra had mentioned. Her behavior is very unusual. They bring her in for questioning, and the police quickly notice that she is even flirting with the police, which shows that she is not at all concerned about her friend's disappearance. Ashley seems to believe that Taylor is okay. She knows that Taylor has been addicted to marijuana in the past and thinks that Taylor is not really missing but is simply indulging her addiction. Ashley speculates that after receiving some money, Taylor relapsed and went off to use. However, this explanation seems unconvincing because Ashley had previously told Cassandra about the trip to the farm, but she didn't mention that. Only when the police press her does Ashley reveal that they went to the farm because Taylor wanted to relax. During the trip, Taylor confided in her about the stress she was under from the divorce proceedings, which had affected her mental health. After some time, Taylor expressed that she was tired and wanted to go home. She called an Uber and left. Ashley reported that she hadn't seen or heard from Taylor, despite making several attempts to call her. The police were aware of a money issue that Ashley was supposed to resolve but was avoiding, leading them to suspect she was hiding something. Suddenly, Ashley started mentioning a safe deposit box and money, claiming she had no knowledge of the funds being talked about. At this point, the police were confused as there was no clear information regarding the money. Police then decided to look into text messages between her and Taylor. They discovered numerous discussions about money, with Ashley frequently postponing meetings and transferring money. In the text messages, they talked about going to the bank on September 8th to withdraw money. Police requested footage from cameras near Taylor's home. After reviewing the videos, they found the women near Taylor's apartment, which matched Cassandra's earlier account. Ashley was in a car in front of the house when Cassandra left. Taylor then left the house and left with Ashley. Using geolocation, police tracked Taylor and Ashley's movements. Police reviewed surveillance footage from across the city and saw them buying beer and food, which appeared to be normal. However, no further information about their whereabouts was available after that. Inconsistencies began to appear between Ashley's testimony. However, the police decided to release her because they did not have enough evidence against her at that time. After that, Ashley contacted the police station almost daily to check on the progress of the investigation and to see if they had any new information. She wanted to help and often recounted the details of that day, as well as places where Taylor might have gone. During the conversation, she suggested that police should search alleys and talk to people who are selling illegal substances. She believed that Taylor was simply depressed and using drugs uncontrollably, and she repeatedly urged the police to follow up on this lead. She also talked about some suspicious suspects that she had seen with Taylor. Despite Ashley's best efforts to appear concerned, but police are still investigating her connection to Taylor's disappearance. Video evidence shows that Ashley visited the bank after Taylor went missing. During that visit, she withdrew money from Taylor's card. Police are particularly concerned about any potential conflict between Ashley and Taylor. Ashley had a strong motive for her actions, the $34,000 in question. It is suspected that she deliberately delayed her response because she did not want to return the money. Fearing that Taylor might report this to the police, Ashley may have decided to eliminate her friend. With Taylor missing for such a long time, there are concerns that she is no longer alive, but this needs to be confirmed. Ashley had a significant advantage. She worked for the police department and was married to a former deputy chief of the Battery Falcons. This created a difficult situation for the officers, who could not be sure of their safety while investigating her. As a result, they chose to keep the investigation secret. In October, Ashley was called in for questioning again. As the case progressed, documentary and circumstantial evidence accumulated that linked her to Taylor's disappearance. The police noticed a marked change in Ashley's behavior. She went from being outgoing and flirtatious to being withdrawn and clearly anxious. By this time, the police had verified that most of her previous statements were lies. They presented her with clear contradictions in her testimony and began investigating the cashing of hidden checks, which were likely to have forged signatures. At the very least, this could lead to accusations of fraud, but there could be darker motives behind these actions. Ashley initially claimed that she and Taylor had gone to East Milton, where they allegedly spent the day at a farm with animals. They were last seen on surveillance footage at 11:45 a.m., which was the only footage of Taylor alive during her initial interview. She was recorded on surveillance cameras in various locations throughout the day, but she was seen alone. As the police continued to talk to Ashley, she became increasingly nervous. Her answers became more confused, and she struggled to explain the discrepancies in her story. The police obtained a search warrant for the farmhouse but found no evidence in the large area. They then asked about the checks to determine if they were indeed counterfeit. If the checks were genuine, that would mean that Taylor was still alive when Ashley went to the bank, but Ashley could not give a clear answer. She just said that the checks could be real. While examining the geolocation data on Ashley's cell phone, police discovered that she had been staying at Britt Road for an extended period of time. This was another farm owned by her family. In fact, they had been there for several hours before Taylor disappeared. Ashley again confirmed that Taylor was going to buy a truck from a dealership. But this time, she added new details to the story. She said that Taylor was going back to the farm. Ashley had not mentioned these details in her earlier statements, claiming that Taylor had asked her to keep the incident private. Ashley believed that Taylor was still alive and would come back, so she did not want to harm her reputation in front of the police. However, she lied multiple times, leading the police to lose trust in her. The police were very interested in the Ashley family farm in Britt Road. It was a large, isolated area that would have been a fit place to commit the crime and cover it up. During their questioning, the police noted another strange aspect of Ashley's behavior: why she did not contact the police immediately when Taylor promised to return but did not show up. It was clear that Taylor was in trouble and needed help. Although Ashley tried to show concern to the police, she made no effort to find Taylor. Why did she wait until she was called in for questioning to show concern? These questions remain unanswered, but the police believe that Ashley was withholding important information. After her trip to the farm with Taylor, Ashley frequently called the police station to check on the investigation into her friend's disappearance, especially after her initial interview. She was anxious to know if she was being considered a suspect. After her conversation with the police, Ashley realized that she was the prime suspect in the case. She decided to ask for a lawyer, which ended her visit to the police station. On the morning of October 19, 2017, Ashley returned home. That afternoon, police obtained a search warrant for the farm where she and Taylor had been staying. Specially trained dogs were deployed in the search, and within 2 hours, they discovered a suspicious burial site. It was a small pit that appeared to have been recently dug and had been covered with concrete. A human skull was found in a shallow grave, along with other remains that had been hastily buried in the dirt and construction debris. The victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the body could not be identified at the scene. However, based on clothing and jewelry, it is believed that it was Taylor. An autopsy confirmed that the body was Taylor Wright, 30. The identification was completed using dental records and DNA analysis. Ashley was arrested that evening, October 19, 2018, and charged with premeditated murder. Ashley's defense attorney believed in her innocence, but the abundance of circumstantial evidence made it challenging to convince the jury of her non-involvement in the crime. The attorney focused on Ashley's psychological profile, portraying her as sweet, pretty, and a police officer, which seemed inconsistent with being a violent criminal. Friends and family described Ashley as quiet, modest, and incapable of murder, especially when considering her physical attributes. In contrast, Taylor was physically stronger, leading the prosecution to question the defense's arguments. The lawyer developed his strategy based on the fact that the police lacked direct evidence to prove Ashley's guilt. There was no murder weapon, no witnesses, and no DNA linking Ashley to the body. This made it difficult for the prosecutor's office to connect Ashley to the crime. One witness was the victim's ex-husband, Jeff. He stated that he reached out to Ashley a few days after his Taylor went missing, trying to locate her to address some matters related to their marriage and divorce. Jeff contacted Ashley via social media. She claimed that the last time she saw Taylor was when she was exchanging money. She expressed concern about whether Taylor had arrived safely. This was a new detail that Ashley had never mentioned before, leading the police to realize that she was a pathological liar who had deceived everyone around her. Although Jeff was initially investigated and cleared as a suspect due to a solid alibi, he still had a strong motive. The lawyer attempted to redirect the jury's attention to Jeff's possible involvement in his ex-wife's murder. But these efforts were unsuccessful. The testimonies from Ashley's close friends greatly influenced the jury. They revealed that the Ashley was not as she seemed. She frequently visited a strip club. Bartenders and staff stated that just before Taylor went missing, Ashley spoke negatively about Taylor. Later, a gun associated with Taylor's death was discovered in Ashley's house. After new evidence emerged, the Ashley admitted to spiking Taylor's beer with a strong substance. However, when Taylor took a sip, she noticed the drink tasted odd and clearly spoiled. She spat it out and refused to drink any more, which likely led to the failure of Ashley's poisoning plan. Despite this admission, Ashley denied any involvement in the shooting of her friend. The prosecution argued that she had a strong motive. Ashley was holding on to a large sum of Taylor's money and was delaying returning it. Taylor desperately needed the money to pay her lawyer, so if Ashley delayed paying, Taylor would likely report the matter to the police. This situation gave Ashley a motive to get rid of her friend. The police later discovered the reason for the delay in returning the money. Ashley had been secretly having an affair with a man named Brandon, without her husband's knowledge. It was revealed that she had spent all of the money on Brandon, including giving him a motorcycle just weeks before Taylor went missing. This coincided with the time she had received money from Taylor. In court, Brandon admitted that Ashley had frequently given him expensive gifts, but he did not know where she got the money, as she had no other source for such a large sum of money. The police tracked Ashley's movements and discovered that she had gone to Home Depot after Taylor went missing. The police spoke to a sales clerk who confirmed that Ashley had purchased several bags of quick-drying solution. When the substance found in Taylor's grave was tested, it matched the quick-drying compound mentioned by the hardware store employee. This suggests that Ashley attempted to quickly hide Taylor's body on the farm to avoid detection. However, Ashley's attorney argued that she was not physically able to carry the heavy bags, dig the grave, and move Taylor's body. The jury then deliberated for about 4 hours and found Ashley MacArthur guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 25 years. She also served an additional 7 years for fraud related to Taylor Wright's finances. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Chiara Poggi. Chiara Poggi was born in Vigai, Italy, on March 31, 1981. She studied economics and landed a job as a financier at a large company. She was a delicate girl with expressive blue eyes. She was determined to advance her career and become a manager, with the ultimate goal of starting her own business. To achieve this, she focused on her studies and graduated. Alongside her professional ambitions, Chiara also wanted to start a family. At that time, she had been in a relationship with a man named Alberto for 7 years. Unfortunately, all her dreams seemed to stop there, as fate had other plans for her. On August 13, 2007, at approximately 9:12 a.m., Chiara was going about her daily routine when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, unaware that this decision would lead to her death just a few hours later. At 1:50 p.m., Alberto called the Italian Emergency Services, 118, to report a tragedy at his girlfriend's home. Alberto had discovered Chiara's body. He explained that he had visited and found her lying in a pool of blood. When the dispatcher asked if he could help the victim, Alberto said he couldn't bear to look at the scene and had already left to contact the police. He provided the address and implied that his girlfriend was already dead when he called. When asked why he did not wait for the police at the scene, the Alberto explained that the house was located on a dead-end street, making it hard for the police to find. He decided to go to the police himself and bring them to the tragedy scene to prevent confusion. The Carabinieri arrived after being directed by the emergency services dispatcher. All the doors of the house were locked, so the officers had to climb over the fence. Once inside the kitchen, they discovered signs of a struggle. The Chiara seemed to have been attacked while cooking. Dishes were scattered, and there were open boxes containing a knitting needle, which suggested a confrontation might have taken place. The police also found initial evidence of a violent crime. There were drops of blood on the floor. And in the room near the exit, they discovered a potholder and white slippers that were later confirmed to belong to the Chiara. The Carabinieri entered the next room and discovered Chiara lying face down on the steps near the basement entrance. She appeared to have been taken by surprise, as she was still wearing her pink summer pajamas. Chiara showed signs of a severe beating. It seemed she had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, likely a hammer. The police officers quickly spotted important evidence in the pool of blood, a strand of hair that obviously did not belong to Chiara and a distinctive shoe print left in the dried blood. The lack of warmth in the Chiara's body suggested that she had been killed a few hours earlier. The police quickly contacted Chiara's parents. Rita, the mother, was on vacation in Trentino and had missed the call. She called back around 3:30 p.m. and was so distraught by the news that she nearly fainted. She rushed back to the city. When Rita arrived at the police station, her husband, Giuseppe, Chiara's father, was there. Nicola Stassi, Alberto's father, was also there when his son was brought to the station. Alberto called his father for support. Alberto, 20, shared his story of events with the police by the time Chiara's parents arrived. Alberto said he called Chiara at 9:45 a.m., but she did not answer. He was not concerned at first, thinking she might still be asleep. After noon, he made several attempts to contact her on both her cell phone and her home phone, but received no response. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to go play golf. After returning from his match at around 12:30 p.m., Alberto found all of Chiara's doors locked and she was not answering his phone calls. Worried, he climbed over the fence and tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then broke in through the kitchen window, the only way into the house. Inside, he found the TV on. At first, he thought Chiara might still be asleep in her room. However, when he could not find her, he went into the kitchen and saw drops of blood on the dishes. He then went into the living room, where he discovered her body, leaving him in shock. It's strange that he didn't approach Chiara to check on her or try to help. Instead, he ran to get the investigator. At that moment, she was still alive, and she might have been saved. Rather than ensuring his girlfriend was okay or providing first aid, he left the house and headed to the police station. Once in the car, he called for an ambulance. During the police interrogation, they noticed his odd behavior and questioned why he didn't check if the girl was breathing. Instead of helping her, he just ran away and called the police. Alberto explained that he was scared and confused, which led him to call for help right away. However, he could have stayed, called for medics, and waited for the ambulance while performing CPR. He claimed he left because he felt unsafe in the house after the attack and sought protection from police. The Alberto spent the entire day at the police station and around midnight. He was getting ready to meet with the police again to answer their questions. Meanwhile, forensic experts were carefully examining the crime scene and were puzzled by a footprint found in a pool of the Chiara's blood. They asked Alberto to show them his shoes. He was wearing special white golf shoes that were spotless. He claimed he had been wearing them when he arrived at his girlfriend's house. However, this raised suspicions because the floor around the body was covered in blood. How could someone walk around in such a bloody scene without getting any blood on their shoes? There wasn't a single drop of blood on the soles, and the Alberto couldn't provide a clear explanation for this. The police decided to question Alberto about his relationship with Chiara, the murdered girl. Alberto described their relationship as wonderful, claiming they had very few problems. Like any couple, they occasionally argued, but these conflicts were minor and quickly resolved. The police then asked him for more details about the events leading up to her death to help establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity. However, Alberto offered no significant information. The police took his fingerprints and ultimately released him due to a lack of evidence, keeping him at the police station for just under a day. Finally, around 7 a.m., Alberto got into his father's car and went home. On August 17th, when police examined the search history and files on Alberto's computer, he claimed he woke up early that morning, around 9 a.m., and was working on his thesis while trying to call his girlfriend, after which he went to play golf. Evidence confirmed that he was home, fed his dog, and then left the house. Although it seemed that Alberto had an alibi, the police remained suspicious. The police continued their investigation to reconstruct the timeline of the attack. They were particularly focused on how the crime occurred and still needed to identify the murder weapon. Based on the condition of the Chiara's body, it appeared the attacker used a metal object, possibly something like a hammer with a pointed end or an ice pick. At that point, the forensic report indicated that Chiara was likely murdered between 9 and 10 in the morning. When the police examined the prime Alberto's mobile phone records, they discovered that his mother called him daily just before 10 a.m. Elizabeth, the mother, confirmed that she spoke to her son that day to check on a friend, seemingly validating his alibi and suggesting he could not have committed the murder during that time. However, upon further investigation of the call logs, the police found that the mother did not call her son that day, raising suspicions. Alberto's motives are unclear. Friends confirmed that Chiara and Alberto had a wonderful relationship, with only minor disagreements that are typical of any young couple. A friend named Marco saw Alberto the day after the tragic event and noticed that Alberto seemed distressed. He refused to eat and spoke very little, often expressing his deep sadness over Chiara's death. Meanwhile, the investigation was progressing. The police had gathered preliminary investigation materials, autopsy reports, and numerous witness testimonies about the couple. After August 20th, forensic experts continued analyzing the evidence, including hair found in a pool of blood that did not belong to the Chiara. They also examined materials collected from under Chiara's fingernails. Additionally, several blood splatters were discovered in the house that did not seem to match Chiara's, suggesting they might belong to the assailant. On the morning of August 22nd, Alberto visited the police station to obtain some documents. He spent a few hours speaking with the police, who were hoping to gather new information from him. Additionally, at 2 p.m., Alberto was scheduled to take part in an interrogation with the prosecutor present. With police showing increased interest, the Alberto was preparing for his meeting with his lawyer. By this time, Alberto had already spent over 26 hours at the station, providing the police with all the information they requested. He repeated his account of the events from August 13th. But the police were more focused on the evening of the 12th, the night before the bloody massacre took place. That night, the couple ordered 2 pizzas from a nearby restaurant and spent the evening eating and watching TV. Alberto then went home. Police scrutinized every detail of his statement for any inconsistencies, especially questioning why Alberto left after dinner. Throughout the investigation, Alberto repeatedly maintained that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend Chiara's death. The prosecution remained skeptical. He questions why there was no blood on Alberto's white sneakers as he moved around the house. Was he really that cautious? Why did Alberto leave on the night of the 12th instead of staying with Chiara? And why did he not help her when he found her unconscious? Unexpectedly, Chiara's neighbor provided some information. At around 9 a.m., she noticed a bicycle parked near the entrance to Chiara's house. As a cyclist, she found this strange, as she had never seen Chiara or Alberto riding such a bicycle. Later, the bicycle was spotted near Chiara's fence. The neighbor, who was knowledgeable about bicycles, realized that it was a women's model equipped with unusual accessories not usually found on regular bicycles. The woman did not think about what would happen next. She looked out her window around 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. and noticed that the vehicle was no longer by the neighbor's fence. This information caught the police's attention, as it might be an important clue. The police realized that finding this bike could significantly advance their investigation, as locating the owner might lead them to the killer. However, their search for this type of bike hit a dead end because the description provided was too vague. Later, another neighbor, a 47-year-old woman, contacted the police. She reported seeing a bike near Chiara's house at 9:30 a.m. and confirmed it was a women's model with a new color, although some details did not match. It's possible that one of the neighbors had remembered those details incorrectly. Meanwhile, over several days, several lawyers defended Alberto, including his brothers, Giulio and Giuseppe Colli, who worked in the Vi Giovanna Bar Association. However, by this time, the police had discovered the complicated love story between Chiara and Alberto. The love between the Chiara and Alberto was genuine, and their relationship was going well. This was evident to those who knew them and was reflected in their frequent exchanges of affectionate messages. They hardly ever argued, and when they did, the disagreements were minor and quickly resolved. However, in the week leading up to the incident, some unusual changes were observed in their relationship. It seems that Chiara has recently stopped wanting to see Alberto, and they have started sleeping in separate rooms even when he stays overnight. Alberto attributes this behavior to the fact that he prefers to sleep in a double bed in Chiara's brother's room, where he finds it more comfortable. There were very few photographs of the couple together, raising concerns about their relationship. Instead, the Alberto's secret folder contained hundreds of photos of women's feet in shoes, leading to suspicions that the couple's seemingly happy exterior was hiding deeper issues. This raised the question, could Alberto's unusual fetish have been connected to the murder? The case took a dramatic turn 43 days after Chiara's death, when police discovered Alberto's sister's bicycle, matching a neighbor's description. Blood was found on the pedals, which was later confirmed through laboratory testing to be Chiara's. However, Alberto's sister had a solid alibi, as she was at work at the time of the incident. Initially, Alberto was believed to have borrowed his sister's bicycle. The family and the community were shocked. They did not believe Chiara's boyfriend was guilty until the very end. However, when traces of her DNA were found on the pedals of the bike, they had no choice but to accept his guilt. Relatives were also shocked by Alberto's behavior. He met with them several times after the tragedy and still steadfastly maintained his innocence. The parents displayed clear signs of their grief. The lawyer passionately defended his client, trying to explain the presence of the Chiara's blood on the petals, despite the significant amount found, which was not just a few drops. The defense attempted to dismiss this evidence by suggesting it could be related to menstruation and other implausible theories. Ultimately, despite these efforts, Alberto was arrested. On September 28, the judge reviewed the case file and determined that there was not enough evidence against the suspect, leading to Alberto's immediate release from prison. The case file was then sent back to the prosecution for further examination. Police had found a significant amount of specific pornographic material on the Alberto's computer. They believed that his girlfriend might have discovered his secret fetish, which could have caused tension between them. A conflict arose, and this seems plausible considering that on August 12, the day before the incident, the Alberto had been working on his laptop at Chiara's place and had left it there, giving her access to the stored information. Alberto had many photographs of women's shoes that he seemed to have taken himself, particularly during a recent trip to London shortly before his relationship with Chiara started to decline. Additionally, there were images capturing private moments between the Chiara and Alberto. These photos were blurred, but the girl appeared to be quite embarrassed in them. It's possible that the Alberto's specific preferences in intimacy contributed to their disagreements. Alberto acknowledged that he has certain fetishes, but he claimed that the Chiara always accepted, and it never caused any issues between them. On November 3, 2008, Alberto was charged once more. Police believed they had sufficient evidence to link him to Chiara's murder. It was clear that the Alberto knew the victim well, as he had unrestricted access to her home. This was supported by the fact that nothing was broken or stolen, and the Chiara was found wearing her home clothes. The strongest evidence was a footprint found in the Chiara's blood. It was a size 42 shoe print that matched the Alberto's foot size. After committing the crime, Alberto replaced his old shoes with a brand new pair that he wore during his first interrogation. Despite blood prints being found on the bicycle pedals, he persisted in denying any involvement. It seems he successfully disposed of the sneakers he wore when he left the Chiara's house after the murder. On February 24, 2009, during the preliminary hearing, the prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence. Although they had initially requested a life sentence, after reviewing the case documents, the judge determined that further improvements were needed. He identified many of the evidence as being implausible. Extensive research was conducted, including a reconstruction of the events using computer models. A comprehensive model of Chiara's house was built, allowing the police to track the killer's movements. On August 13, 2009, a detailed report was submitted to the court. According to this report, the Alberto turned on his computer at 9:35 a.m. and viewed several pornographic photographs. He continued this activity until 12:20 p.m. and identified only 3 possible time intervals during which the murder could have occurred. The house alarm was deactivated at 9:12 a.m., and there is no information about Alberto's activities between then and 9:35 a.m. The second time window for the murder was from 12:20 p.m. to 12:46 p.m., as the Alberto called Chiara's mobile phone from his home shortly after 12:46 p.m. There was also a time frame available for the murder from 12:46 p.m. to 1:26 p.m. The forensic expert determined that the Chiara likely died between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, suggesting that the earlier time frame was more plausible. Meanwhile, the defense pointed out several mistakes made by the police during the investigation. The forensic expert noted that evidence was mishandled. There were numerous errors and inconsistencies, including the failure to collect the Chiara's fingerprints. Police also did not investigate other people who may have used the bicycle seen near Chiara's house, which weakened the prosecution's case. Additionally, the provisional time frame established suggests that Alberto had no more than 23 minutes to commit the crime, set up the scene, escape, and dispose of the shoes. Alberto lived a mile from Chiara's house, and if he had been able to ride his bicycle to Chiara's house, it would have been physically difficult and inconsistent with the timeline of events. Despite this, the prosecution believed he could have done so. On December 17th, the judge left the courtroom to consider his verdict. The prosecution asked for a 30-year prison sentence. However, they failed to present convincing evidence of his guilt. There were no bloody shoes, video footage, witness testimony, or obvious motives linking Alberto to the murder. Ultimately, the judge found Alberto not guilty. The verdict shocked the local community, which had expected a different outcome and labeled Alberto a murderer. However, the case did not end there. Chiara's family filed an appeal on November 8, 2011, leading to a new trial. This hearing lasted several weeks, during which the public and media were barred from the courtroom, allowing journalists only to enter when the decision was announced. The court acquitted the Alberto Stasi once more during a retrial on April 18, 2013. The lawyer emphasized that the charges lacked grounding and that there was insufficient evidence. He also argued that it would have been impossible for Alberto to commit the murder and cover up the evidence in just 23 minutes. Following the death of Alberto's father, who was killed in a Pavia hospital on April 9, 2014, a new phase in the investigation began. This phase included various pieces of evidence, such as computer modeling and a thorough analysis of a bicycle found in the Alberto's home. Unexpectedly, during this investigation, Alberto confessed to murdering Chiara. The case was so complex that without this confession, he likely would have been acquitted again. However, under public pressure, he ultimately admitted his guilt. On December 17, 2014, 37-year-old Alberto Stasi received a 16-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €1 million in compensation to the Chiara's family.